Su Jin was jolted awake by a mouthful of seawater. Salty, cold, with a metallic rust tang clinging to his throat. He rolled onto his side, his elbows slamming against the concrete floor. A violent fit of racking coughs tore through him. His vision swam black for a moment before faint red light slowly seeped back into sight. A single emergency lamp hung far off in the distance, flickering on, then dimming out again. The puddles scattered across the ground caught the red glow. Reflected in those fragments were shipping containers, steel girders, and several loose power cables dangling overhead. Tiny sparks popped at the cable ends, a sharp crack that made his shoulders jolt with fright. Su Jin raised a hand to his head. A swollen lump bulged beneath his fingertips. Pain flared hot and sharp. It was nothing like the faint, weightless ache of a dream. This was raw, real agony, sharp enough to make him want to curse just from touching it. A warehouse. A port warehouse. He'd never cared for places like this, perpetually damp, cut through by harsh winds, lined with rows upon rows of metal shipping crates that blurred every sense of direction after too long a stare. And now the scene was far worse. A black streaked trail snaked past his feet, dragged from some unknown spot. Thin wispy, white smoke curling off its edges. "Hey, you awake?" A voice sounded from his left, hushed and trembling. Su Jin turned his head. 3 people huddled behind a wooden crate. A middle-aged man in a reflective safety vest clutched a half-broken steel pipe. Beside him stood a lanky youth who looked like a soaked student, picking at his cuffs. Furthest away squatted a man covered in tattoos, repeatedly mashing the power button on his phone. Tap, tap. The screen flashed bright, then cut to black each time. "No signal. How can there be no signal?" the tattooed man muttered. "I was just behind the bar, hadn't even finished my cigarette." Su Jin said nothing in reply. He patted down his pockets first. His phone was still there. His palms were slick with seawater. His fingerprint failed twice before unlocking. June 18th, 2:12 in the early morning. A small red icon sat at the bottom of the lock screen, shaped like a crack circled by a thin line. The signal bar sat completely empty, and the location read, North Bay Old Port, Linhai City. Linhai City. He stared at the words for several seconds, pressing the tip of his tongue hard against his molars. The city he lived in bore a different name entirely. The map app still loaded, its offline cache marked with the label, Warehouse Zone 7. His memo app opened without issue, the half-written grocery list he'd jotted down the night before pinned at the top. A line of text he'd never typed lingered at the very bottom. Xingong do not surrender the unturned cards, Xingong. Su Jin's gaze locked onto that sentence. His finger hovered an inch above the screen. Why would a grocery list carry a message like this? He went to tap the line to read more, but the screen flickered abruptly. The words vanished without a trace. Only the original list remained. Toothpaste, garbage bags, eggs. He'd even misspelled the word for toothpaste. Su Jin's atoms apple-bobbed once. A news push notification lingered frozen at the top. It was time-stamped 1:57 a.m., sudden lockdown issued for North Bay Old Port. Citizens advised to avoid restricted blockade zones. The rest of the article failed to load. "Buddy, you got signal over there?" The middle-aged man asked. Su Jin tilted the phone screen toward him. The man's throat bobbed heavily after a single glance. "Nothing either?" "Nope." "Then we're done for." A faint noise echoed from deep within the warehouse. Soft, barely audible, like fingernails scraping sheet metal. The student clapped a hand over his mouth instantly. Su Jin froze too. The iron gate that should have served as the main exit sat straight ahead, dark black water seeping steadily in through the gap beneath its frame. This was no ordinary seawater. It glistened pitch black, thin thread like strands writhing within it, resembling rotted seaweed or swollen fine blood vessels. Where the black liquid touched the concrete floor, thin plumes of white smoke sizzled upward. Su Jin pulled his sneakers back a small distance. "Don't touch that water." The middle-aged man blinked in surprise. "You know what that stuff is?" "No clue." Su Jin watched the curling smoke warily. "But that's all the more reason not to touch it." The tattooed man suddenly shot to his feet. His knee slammed into the wooden crate, sending a hollow thud echoing out. "I'm not staying here," he said firmly. "There's bound to be people outside. A port this big can't be completely abandoned." The middle-aged man hissed, keeping his voice low. "Don't go causing trouble. My mom's waiting for me at home. I've got to pick up her medication first thing tomorrow morning." The tattooed man's voice cut off mid-sentence, choking up. He snatched a flashlight off the ground and charged for the narrow side door beside the main gate. The door's lock had warped out of shape, and he began slamming the flashlight against it over and over. Bang! Bang! The sound bounced wildly off every wall inside the warehouse. A cold prickle crept across Su Jin's scalp. "Quit hitting it." The tattooed man acted as if he hadn't heard, striking the lock once more. A crack split the door frame open. Frigid, damp wind rushed in, thick with a heavy rotten fish stench. The man leaned his face close to the gap, ready to shout for help, then went rigid all at once. Su-Jin caught sight of a single eye pressed flush against the crack. It was no human eye, clouded, bulging, its whites crisscrossed with thick black veins. It pressed far too near, the pupil rotating slowly as if sizing them up one by one. A strangled whimper squeezed out of the tattooed man's throat. Ah! The side door buckled inward under force. A water-soaked hand snaked through the gap, its 5 fingers stretched thin and limp as if soaked soft, nails glossy jet black. It clamped tight over the man's face. His noise cut off completely. When the figure was dragged out through the door, the soles of his shoes scraped 2 long wet streaks across the concrete. The flashlight slipped from his grasp, its beams sweeping wildly before rolling into a puddle and cutting out. The student doubled over, retching violently. The steel pipe slipped from the middle-aged man's grip, clattering hard against the wooden crate. Su-Jin's stomach twisted sharply. He hadn't eaten breakfast or a proper meal the night before. He had only eaten a single bowl of instant noodles. Strange, how his mind fixated on ramen at a moment like this. Heavy thuds slammed against the iron gate from outside. Boom. A huge bulge bulged outward in the metal panel. More black liquid oozed through the cracks, pooling thicker on the floor and eating tiny pockmarked craters into the concrete wherever it settled. Su-Jin stared at the gate, watching its hinges rattle violently. Once, twice. It wouldn't hold for long. He glanced right. A narrow shadowed gap lay behind a row of shipping containers, dark and cramped, potentially leading to another section. A wall-mounted floor plan hung overhead. The red emergency lamp glinted across it just enough to make out blurry lettering. The lettering read, "Maintenance Corridor. This way, right?" He spoke the words and moved forward without hesitation. The middle-aged man stared blankly. Huh. Right side, behind the containers. Su-Jin took 2 steps forward, then glanced back at the student. The boy's legs had turned to jelly, unable to support his weight. The middle-aged man swore under his breath, bending to sling the student's arm over his shoulders and prop him upright. The iron gate crashed again. This time it didn't merely bulge. It split clean open. A jagged tear ripped straight down the center of the metal sheet, its edges curling inward. Pitch-black darkness flooded through the gap. A human-shaped creature hunkered against the broken frame. Su-Jin only needed one glance. Sweat turned ice-cold down his spine. The creature bore a vague human silhouette, yet was utterly alien. Sharp, bony spurs jutted upward from its hunched shoulders and back. Tangled masses of tendrils dragged loose. They dragged loose from its ribcage. Its facial outline still mimicked a person's, but every feature had warped and melted under the corrosive black contamination. The student couldn't hold back a short, sharp cry. The monster's head twisted toward the sound. Su-Jin frozen for half a heartbeat. The creature's gaze snapped back to him the next instant. It twitched its nostrils, drawing in a deep sniff. As if it had caught a scent. Su-Jin glanced down at his left wrist. A single drop of the black liquid had splashed onto his skin without him noticing. A faint dark purple burn ring spread outward from the spot. The burning pain registered in full force a beat later. Shit, he muttered. The word barely left his mouth before the monster lunged straight for him. Su-Jin spun and ran for all he was worth. His sneakers skidded on the wet concrete, his knees slamming hard against the edge of a wooden crate. It was a blow that nearly sent him crashing to his knees. He stayed upright, shoving off the crate's corner to twist his body into the tight passage between stacked containers. Metal shelving collapsed behind him with a deafening screech. The noise rang so close it felt pressed against the back of his skull. Su-Jin gasped for air, his lungs burning. At the end of the narrow corridor sat an abandoned forklift, its cargo bed piled haphazardly with rusted chains. The bed was piled with rusted chains and tattered cloth scraps. He had no idea how to operate a forklift. He'd never even signed up for driving lessons, and he'd crashed an electric scooter twice already. But chains could serve as barriers. Su-Jin threw himself toward the vehicle, grabbing a heavy length of chain. Rust scraped a raw gash across his palm, which he ignored completely. He looped the chain around the locking latch of a nearby shipping container and hauled backward. Clatter! A canvas waterproof tarp and several empty wooden crates crashed down from overhead, blocking the corridor temporarily. The monster was stalled only for a split second. Su-Jin rolled around the opposite side of the forklift, slamming into the concrete. His left arm scraped against the rough surface to leave a fiery, stinging wound. When he scrambled back to his feet, the metallic tang of blood filled his mouth. A fire exit door stood ahead, propped half open. Su Jin sprinted toward it, his fingers brushing the metal handle, at which point the burn mark on his wrist flared with searing heat. His legs buckled, and he nearly stumbled through the doorway. Pain exploded across his skin. It was worse than simple burning. It felt as though countless cold, thin threads burrowed into his flesh, snaking upward along his veins. He scrubbed frantically at the wound with his sleeve. The fabric blackened instantly, its edges curling away. The fabric released a sharp, burnt odor. The monster squeezed into the narrow corridor behind him, its claws scraping the walls with a shrill, grating sound. Su Jin's shoulder rammed the fire door fully open. The space beyond was no exit. It was a cramped storage closet. 3 solid walls lined with discarded life vests, rusted metal toolboxes, and faded warning signs printed with the words, "No open flames." The only window was sealed behind thick iron bars. Through the gaps, he could make out the silhouettes of port cranes and the faint glow of distant city building lights far off on the horizon. Civilization was right there, visible within sight. Completely out of reach. Su Jin slammed the door shut behind him, snapping the small latch into place. Click. The sound was tiny, absurdly trivial given their predicament. The monster pressed its body flat against the metal door a heartbeat later. Its nails dragged slowly across the sheet metal in a drawn-out scrape. Su Jin stumbled back until his hips hit a metal storage shelf, reaching into his pocket for his phone. Midway through the motion, his fingertips brushed an object. It was an unfamiliar hard object. Thin, ice-cold, perfectly square. He pulled the item out into his palm. A black and gold card case rested light in his grasp. No bigger than his palm, unmarked and stripped of decorations. A thin silver line ran along its front, curved like a half-opened door or an unturned playing card. Su Jin stared at the case in bewilderment. Where had this thing come from? The scraping noise outside the door cut off abruptly. Su Jin lifted his gaze. That same cloudy bulging eye pressed against the narrow gap in the metal door once more. Semi-transparent, glowing text floated across the surface of the card case. Xingang detected host critical life sign deterioration. Xingang. Xingang Myriad Worlds card case system binding in progress. Xingang. Su Jin's throat tightened. A system. He'd only ever seen the term on digital screens before, something that always felt far removed from his own life. Now that it was happening to him, his first thought was a desperate plea for it to hurry up. A heavy blow crashed against the door frame. A metal toolbox bounced off the shelf overhead and clattered to the floor. Xingang binding complete. Xingang new player starter pack delivered. Xingang pack reward 1. Supreme grade item, final fate card case. Xingang the card case split open of its own accord. It did not spring open sharply. It opened more like a thin veil of pure darkness peeling apart from its center. Su Jin's vision blurred for a brief instant. He saw an impossibly long table stretching endlessly beyond the edge of sight. Empty chairs lined both sides. A single unturned card resting face down sat in front of every seat. A raised platform sat at the head of the table, vacant save for one dual-tone black and white trump card laid flat. The card's artwork was no standard jester. It bore a cracked royal crown. Su Jin tried to blink. His eyelids refused to move. Xingang pack reward 2. Main trump card binding authority. Xingang king trump card. Unique. Non-transferable. Non-separable. Xingang. The trump card flipped itself upright. A wash of black and white cold light flooded his left wrist. The dark purple burn mark was sealed beneath the black and gold card pattern etched directly into his skin. Half the burning agony faded away, the rest trapped deep within his bones, throbbing unceasingly. Su Jin leaned against the metal shelf to steady himself, drawing in a shaky breath. Another crack split the door panel wider. One of the monster's hands forced through the gap, its 5 elongated fingers scrabbling wildly against the metal edge. Nails leaving smoking scorch marks across the wall. Su Jin stepped backward, his lower back colliding hard with the shelf's corner. Xingang king trump card binding finished. Xingang card bearer. Su Jin. Xingang main trump authorities. Subordinate card distribution. Card seat recall. Card surface communication. Conscious card council. Intra-card storage. Xingang hidden authority. Temporarily borrow partial power from subordinate card holders. Current host body unawakened. Forced power borrowing carries risk of physical collapse. Xingang lines of glowing text floated into view one after another. Su Jin scanned them rapidly, his eyes stinging. Cut to the point, he ground the words out between gritted teeth. I'm about to get torn apart. The system offered no snarky retort. A relief. If it had replied with a generic prompt, he would have hurled it. He would have hurled the card case at the door regardless of whether it would break. Xingang pack reward 3. Basic authorities unlocked. Xingong card seat binding. Xingong intra-card storage. Xingong card surface communication. Xingong conscious card council. Xingong subordinate card returned to slot upon death. Xingong the lines of text flickered past at high speed. Su Jin only grasped half their meaning. Cards. Binding people. Long-distance communication. A shared mental council. An automatic recovery of cards when their holders perished. Great, just fantastic. It sounded like running a corporation, recruit members, hold group meetings, even retrieve fallen subordinates' cards afterward. But the door was moments away from splintering entirely. He had no time to organize a team, not even a sturdy steel pipe to defend himself with. The monster's head squeezed through the widening crack. Its warped, melted face pressed flush against the metal, thick black liquid dripping down. It showed no sign of pain, instead emitting a wet, sticky rumble that sounded like a distorted laugh. Su Jin tightened his grip around the card case. His palms were slick with seawater, nearly sending it slipping out of his grasp. Xingong detected host current physical tier, unawakened. Xingong detected hostile contaminated entity, tier 1 corrupted aberration, continuously strengthening. Xingong final starter pack, reward unlocked. Xingong the final reward. Su Jin fixated on those 3 words, his own ragged breathing filling his ears. He had 1,000 questions burning in his mind. Why him? What kind of world was this? Could he opt out and return to normal life? Forget it. Activate it. His voice came out hoarse and thin. An empty card slot deep within the card case lit up bright white. Xingong pack, reward 4. Initial companion summoning authority. Xingong rank tier, 5th grade city suppressing class. Xingong starter identity card. 6 of spades. Xingong card bearer, please confirm. Instant summoning. Xingong the iron door buckled completely under the string. The monster dragged its fully soaked body into the storage closet, its bony shoulder spurs bending the metal frame as it forced its bulk through. Su Jin lifted his left wrist. The black and gold card pattern etched into his skin blazed with light. He stared at the label 6 of spades, the sharp metallic taste of blood spreading across his tongue. 5th grade. City suppressing class. The title carried immense weight, sounding extraordinarily powerful. Confirm. Su Jin barely whispered the 2 words. His voice was almost too quiet to hear. It was like speaking to a phone voice assistant. But no ordinary voice assistant would grant him a 5th grade city suppressing ally, while a monster loomed inches from his throat. The card case did not immediately materialize a person. Instead, a sharp invisible tug pulled at the core of his mind. His physical surroundings, the rust of the storage closet, the rotten stench of the monster, all receded. The ear-splitting grind of warped metal distant and muted. Su Jin's feet still stood on concrete flooring. Yet an endless long table materialized directly in front of his eyes. Its surface split black and white, cold as frozen storage. Rows of chairs lined both sides, each backrest carved with a suit's symbol, spades, hearts, clubs, diamonds, stretching endlessly into the distance. All empty enough to send a chill down his neck. At the highest head seat, the card hovered. The black and white king trump card hovered suspended mid-air. The cracked crown printed across its face stared straight at him. Su Jin instinctively dropped his gaze. The card pattern wrapped around his left wrist burned bright. The storage closet had not vanished. The monster continued to wriggle fully inside. He could see its claw resting atop the door frame and hear the scrape of bony spurs against metal. Yet his consciousness was forcibly pulled into the realm of the long table. It felt as if he watched a movie while simultaneously being forced to read a complex manual. A row of blank card slots lit up beneath the tabletop. Within the spades section closest to the main throne, a single card slowly flipped over. The 6 of spades. Its surface was no cheap printed paper. The black spade emblem resembled a clean surgical cut. Thin gold lines tracing the edge of the number 6. No human figure adorned the card. Yet a frigid, oppressive aura seeped out from its surface, crawling up Su Jin's fingertips and sinking deep into his bones. Xingong initial companion summoning authority matched successfully. Xingong identity card. 6 of spades. Xingong rank tier. 5th grade city suppressing. Xingong binding method. Card bearer personally bestows the card. Xingong 5th grade. City suppressing. Su Jin pressed the cut inside his cheek with his tongue, the flavor of blood thickening in his mouth. He had no concrete idea how powerful it was. But the phrase city suppressing made it clear this was no ordinary minor threat. The monster had squeezed half its body into the storage closet. Its frame was far too tall, the door frame trapping its spiked shoulders. The bony protrusions ground relentlessly against the warped metal, jagged edges scraping chunks of rotted flesh off its face. Black liquid dripping down to sizzle and burn the concrete floor below. Su Jin stepped backward. His spine slammed against the metal storage shelf. An old, discarded life preserver toppled off the upper rack, slamming hard into his shoulder. The blow knocked him sideways, nearly making him drop the card case entirely. How long will binding take? Xing'an card-bearer must assign a code name for the initial companion first. Xing'an now? Right this second. Xing'an affirmative. Xing'an. Su Jin watched the monster's head creep further into the room. This system truly picked the worst timing. A code name. Six of Spades, 5th grade, built for frontline combat and execution. A flood of vague abstract terms rushed through his mind in an instant. Blade, shadow, night, edge. All felt overly hollow and dramatic to speak aloud. The monster swung one massive claw toward him. Su Jin threw himself sideways, his elbow crashing into scattered loose metal screws, a sharp pain making his eyes water. One screw rolled into a puddle of black liquid. The fluid corroded it pale white in an instant. Su Jin stared at that pale scrap of metal, his mind going blank for a split second. Daylight. White blade. No, too wordy. Zhou Run. He gripped the card case tight. Drawing in a ragged gasp, he said, 6 of Spades, code name Zhou Ren. The 6 of Spades card sank slightly within the case. It felt as though a pair of eyes had opened on the opposite side of the card. Xing'an code name confirmed. Xing'an card bestowal commencing. Xing'an. A thin crack split the king trump card pattern wrapped around Su Jin's left wrist. The 6 of Spades shot out from the card case, hovering suspended an inch above his palm. The card itself weighed almost nothing, yet an invisible crushing pressure dragged his wrist downward. He heard a wooden chair scrape against the stone floor beside the long table. Squeak. A faint, quiet sound. The monster lunged forward at full speed. Su Jin had nowhere left to retreat. He pushed the floating 6 of Spades card forward with his palm. Come forth. The card shattered into countless tiny black light motes. Every current of air inside the storage closet fell still for a heartbeat. Not natural wind. Every sound, every scent, every drip of black liquid froze mid-motion, held captive by an overwhelming unseen force. Su Jin watched a tall silhouette materialize directly in front of him. Strikingly tall, clad in close-fitting black garments with narrow sleeves, gripping a long blade that absorbed all light, reflecting no glint whatsoever. The figure stood with their back to Su Jin, shoulder line held low, as if they had been waiting there silently for a very long time. The monster's outstretched claw froze an inch before their chest. A single clear ring echoed as the blade shifted in its sheath. Su Jin never caught the exact motion of the sword being drawn. He only saw the monster's extended arm sever cleanly at the shoulder. Thick black fluid sprayed mid-air before a cold black spade-shaped flash of light pinned the liquid droplets suspended in place. The black cloaked figure turned half their face towards Su Jin. Their voice was low and calm. 6 of Spades, Zhou Run. They paused for a brief beat, awaiting the card-bearer's command. Su Jin steadied himself against the shelf, his palms slick with cold sweat. A command? He glanced at the monster still squeezing inside. He looked at the corroded pits dotting the floor. The answer was obvious. Kill it first. Zhou Run wasted no words. His blade sliced forward in a heavy downward stroke. There was none of the deafening crash expected. It was almost unnervingly quiet, like cutting through a sheet of soaked paper. A black slit split the monster straight down its core, and pitch-black sludge gushed out in a violent surge. Su Jin flinched instinctively, yet a few droplets splattered across the toe of his shoe. The rubber hissed and blistered instantly, curling away in a small charred patch. He pulled his foot back sharply. Brand new shoes, bought just last week. The thought flickered through his mind before he forced it aside. Zhou Run stood by the doorway, long sword resting at his hip. The sludge halted half an inch from the blade, repelled by an invisible layer of energy. The monster's split carcass still writhed, black tendrils snaking across the concrete toward the exit. It's not dead. Su Jin's throat felt parched and raw. Zhou Run stared at the twitching mass, his tone flat and unchanging. Its contamination core still remains intact. Where is it? 3 inches below its throat. Su Jin's gaze darted reflexively to his own neck. 3 inches. He'd never measured the distance. The measurement sounded precise on paper, but staring down a monster, he had no clue how long that span truly was. Zhou Run lifted his sword hand. The tip jabbed forward once. A dull, hollow thud echoed. It echoed from the monster's torso. The black sludge caved inward, as if something had siphoned it out from within. The fleshy tendrils on the floor twitched once, then fell still. Su Jin waited 2 full seconds. Then he waited another. Only once he was certain the creature wouldn't rise again did he notice his knees shaking uncontrollably. He slid down the shelf to sit heavily on the ground. Stacked beside him were life vests. They reeked of harsh plastic fumes. Nausea churned in his empty stomach, leaving nothing but bitter acid burning his throat. His left wrist throbbed far worse, as if a thin needle scraped back and forth against bone. The six of spades hovered beside his forearm, a thin luminous thread linking its etched patterns to the king card. Every pulse of that thread sent a stabbing twinge through Su Jin's temple. Is this supposed to happen? Zhou Ren turned to face him. Su Jin lifted his left hand slightly. This connection. The card bond anchor, Zhou Ren explained. Pain is unavoidable when the card-bearer's power base is this weak. Su Jin fell silent for a beat. You don't beat around the bush, do you? Facts need no embellishment. Fair enough. Su Jin pinched the bridge of his nose with his right hand. This confirmed it all. It wasn't a dream. No dream would lay out the plain truth of his own weakness so bluntly. Noises still rumbled from the warehouse outside. Footsteps echoed in the distance, a middle-aged man shouting for the student. His voice drifted near then faded away again. Su Jin pushed himself upright using the shelf, stepping on a loose screw that sent him staggering. Zhou Ren stretched out a hand to steady him. Su Jin dodged the gesture. It wasn't that he refused help. The man had just cleaved a monster open. His hands were still unwashed. The blade repelled the corrosive sludge, yet the mental revulsion lingered all the same. Zhou Ren noticed. He glanced down at his own palm, seeming to grasp the reason, and withdrew his hand without comment. Su Jin cleared his throat. There are survivors outside. 2 living humans. One with minor injuries. The other teetering on the brink of corruption-induced frenzy. How can you tell? I can sense their vital auras. Su Jin bit back the urge to ask what exactly an aura entailed. Prying would make him sound like a novice. He walked to the doorway, stepping over the monster's remains. His trouser cuff brushed a streak of black sludge, and he shifted quickly aside. The corridor beyond the storage room lay in ruins. Deep gashes scored the walls. Footprints crisscrossed the floor like smudged scribbles on a crumpled worksheet. The middle-aged man and the student had hidden behind a forklift. The teenager clutched his head, repeating the same mantra over and over. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. The older man brandished a steel pipe, its tip trembling in tiny shaky circles as he aimed it at Zhou Ren. When he spotted Su Jin, the man froze for a split second. You're still alive? Su Jin nodded. The man's gaze snapped to Zhou Ren next. Who's he? Su Jin's mouth went dry, caught off guard by the sudden question. Saying they were friends would sound absurd. Claiming Zhou Ren was just a random passerby would be even less believable. Zhou Ren made no move to answer for him, only standing half a step in front of Su Jin, sword tip pointed toward the ground. Su Jin fished his phone out of his pocket. Its screen was cracked along one edge. Glancing at the empty signal bar, he cobbled together a vague half-truth. He's part of the rescue response team. The middle-aged man's eyes lit up. Official agency personnel? Su Jin neither confirmed nor denied. He turned his gaze toward the metal warehouse gate. Pitch black darkness stretched beyond it. He had no way of knowing. He had no way of knowing if more abominations lurked out there. Can we get out? He asked Zhou Ren. Zhou Ren tilted his head, listening intently. No living contaminated entities within 30 paces of the outer gate. Living contaminated entities. The phrase alone spoke of a dangerous, tainted landscape. Su Jin bent to pick up a discarded flashlight. After 2 clicks, it flickered to life. The beam swept across the damp corridor. It caught sight of torn wire mesh fencing far down the hall. Salt sea wind gusted through the broken door, making him sneeze sharply. The student jolted violently at the sound. Su Jin almost muttered an apology. He held his tongue instead. Zhou Ren took the lead, stepping through first. Su Jin followed behind him, with the middle-aged man supporting the terrified student bringing up the rear. All 4 trampled over black sludge. They trampled over sludge and jagged metal shards as they crossed the broken threshold. Su Jin moved at a sluggish pace with every step, wary of stepping on any fragment that might stir back to life. Outside the warehouse sprawled the old port's shipping yard. Siren wails drifted over from a distance. Flashing red and blue emergency lights flickered through sheets of pouring rain. Su Jin halted in his tracks. He stared down at his left forearm. The spade card marking still glowed faintly beneath his skin. A small smoldering ember trapped under flesh. Zhou Ren saw it too. He raised a palm, hovering it nearby. Hovering it a short distance above Su Jin's wrist, the 6 of spades' luminous imprint faded. It left only the king's faint pattern etched over a dark violet burn scar. A dull minor ache lingered. It was akin to peeling a bandage off sensitive skin. Can ordinary people see these marks? Regular humans cannot make out the full card patterns. High-tier espers may detect faint residual energy traces. Su Jin lifted his head to watch the emergency vehicles draw steadily closer. High-tier, another vague, tiered term with no clear frame of reference for its power scale. The middle-aged man murmured from behind him. "Buddy, the rescue crews are here." Su Jin hummed an acknowledgement. Rain dripped off his soaked bangs into his eyes, and he blinked hard to clear his vision. Rescue had arrived, yet his pocket held a casket. At his side stood a Tier 5 city-grade retainer bound to his deck. How was he supposed to explain any of this? The emergency lights drew nearer by the second. Zhou stood motionless in the downpour. His black outerwear was untouched by rainwater. Card-bearer. Su Jin tilted his head to glance over. Zhou had sheathed his blade. "You never finished issuing your first command." Su Jin's gaze drifted to the vehicles. Blockade vehicles rolled into view. Vehicle doors swung open. Uniformed personnel stepped out, their shoulder insignias glinting in the rain. He stuffed his left hand deep into his jacket pocket. "First priority, we survive and get out. We get out of here alive." The rain intensified, pouring down in heavy sheets. Su Jin stood outside the police cordon, frigid rainwater seeping fully into his sneakers. The waterlogged insole squelched with every shift. The noise grated on his nerves, far more irritating than the line of black uniformed officers standing across from him. Blockade trucks blocked off the old port's entryway, their spinning roof lights stabbing at his eyes. Dark uniformed personnel spread out across the yard. Some swept the ground with scanning devices. Others photographed the scene, and a third group unspooled yellow crime scene tape toward the warehouse. Su Jin stared at his hands. He'd pulled his jacket cuff down to cover his left wrist. The damp fabric clung cold and itchy to his skin. The card markings beneath had dimmed, yet their presence lingered heavy, like carrying an unpaid ticket. Like carrying an unpaid transit ticket while standing face-to-face with an inspector. Full name. A young field agent stood before him, clipboard and pen poised over a blank report sheet. Su Jin's response lagged a bit. Su Jin. Age. 22. Occupation. Su Jin froze. How to phrase his old line of work. He pressed his lips together. No steady employment at the moment. The agent glanced up at him briefly. The agent asked no further questions and jotted down a few lines on his form. A short distance away, the middle-aged man huddled under a thermal emergency blanket, his hands trembling nonstop. He'd repeated the story. He'd repeated the story of a swordsman saving their lives 3 times already, his account growing more disjointed until he trailed off mid-sentence. He was seemingly realizing how unbelievable his narrative sounded to them. Paramedics escorted the student into an ambulance. Su Jin watched the vehicle door slide shut, the tight knot of tension coiled in his chest loosening slightly. At least they were alive. That counted for something. Not everyone had perished trapped inside the warehouse. Zhou was nowhere in sight. A split second before the police floodlights swept over their group, Su Jin had recalled him into the 6 of spades card. Or rather, the swordsman had retreated back into the card's plane of existence. The transition had been weightless, like a drop of ink dissolving into still water. Zhou black, cloaked form melted away completely. The card face flared once, then vanished entirely. A dull numbness still lingered in Su Jin's wrist from the pull of the bond. "Which exit corridor did you flee through?" A second voice cut through. It cut through the hum of rain and sirens. Su Jin turned his head. The man speaking was older than the rookie field agent, roughly 30 years old, with cropped short hair and an unfastened rain jacket. His rain jacket zipper hung unfastened at the neck, revealing a dark gray uniform shirt underneath. A name tag was pinned to his chest. Lu Hong. Su Jin read the name once before shifting his gaze to the empty space beside the man's shoulder. The maintenance access corridor on the right side. Alone. There were 2 other survivors with me, the man and the teenager you just saw. What about the entity that attacked you? The stale, briny tang of seawater coated Su Jin's throat, making him fight the urge to cough. "I think it's dead." Lu Heng's pen paused above the report. "Think." Su Jin met his eyes. "It didn't move when I ran out. I didn't dare double back to confirm." His statement balanced half-truth and genuine fear. The monster had indeed lain motionless, and he truly had no desire to linger beside its corpse. Lu Hong held his gaze without immediately writing anything down. Rainwater dripped steadily from the man's brow bone, yet he made no move to wipe it away. The unbroken scrutiny made Su Jin's fingers stiffen, so he stuffed his right hand into his opposite jacket pocket. Brushing the jagged, cracked edge of his broken phone, the sharp plastic dug into his palm. A small blessing. The mild pain grounded his frayed nerves. "You've sustained multiple injuries," Lu Heng noted. Su Jin glanced down at himself. Torn trouser cuffs, raw scrapes across his shoulder, and charred black smudges staining his left arm sleeve. He couldn't let them see his wrist. All falls from scrambling over debris. What about the wound on your forearm? Su Jin's heart skipped a beat. Lu Heng's line of sight locked onto his damp jacket cuff. The soaked fabric clung tight to his skin. The card markings stayed hidden, yet the dark violet burn scar singed the fabric's hem, leaving a ring of charred material visible to anyone watching closely. Su Jin tugged his arm further down the sleeve to obscure the mark. Splashback from that corrosive black sludge. Is it painful? It's manageable. In truth, the agony was bad enough to make him wish he could sever the wrist entirely. But that confession could never pass his lips. Lu Heng waved a nearby paramedic over. Treat his wounds. Prioritize examining any elementium corrosion burns. Elementium. Su Jin filed the unfamiliar term away in his mind. A medic carried over a trauma kit, and Su Jin lowered himself onto a flimsy folding plastic chair. The wobbly legs shifted under his weight the second he sat. It nearly sent him tipping backward into the pouring rain. The medic cut open his jacket sleeve with medical shears. Su Jin tensed his shoulders. His left wrist lay bare to the open air. The violet burn scar remained clear, while the card patterns seemed to sink deeper beneath his skin, leaving only faint, blurred black outlines that resembled scabbed thermal burns. The medic shone a penlight over the injury. Contamination residue is minimal, luckily. Lu Heng leaned forward to take a look as well. Su Jin avoided his stare, focusing instead on the cotton swabs lined up inside the trauma case. One swab, a second, the third packet torn open at the seal. The medic daubed antiseptic solution across the burn. A rush of cold washed over the wound, followed by a sharp, burning sting. Su Jin dug his fingernails hard into the seam of his trousers. You got off extremely lightly, the medic commented. Most people splashed with that black corrosive sludge suffer far worse tissue damage on exposed wrists. Su Jin forced a hollow laugh. Maybe I have naturally thick skin. The medic blinked, caught off guard by the dry quip. Lu Heng did not smile. His gaze drifted toward the warehouse ruins. A field agent jogged over, clutching a sealed evidence bag. Inside rested a fragment of black charred debris, stamped with a crisp spade-shaped indentation along one edge. Su Jin's eyelid twitched involuntarily, a leftover trace from Zhou Ren's sword strike. Lu Heng accepted the evidence bag and studied it for several long seconds. Classify the residual energy signature at the scene? The agent lowered his voice to a hushed murmur. Scanners registered a Tier 5 energy fluctuation. The peak reading was brief and unstable, originating from a source separate from the corrupted entity itself. Su Jin heard every word and schooled his features to feign complete indifference. Tier 5. Zhou Ren's true power tier was far more formidable than he'd initially guessed. Lu Heng stowed the evidence bag away and turned back to face Su Jin. His gaze carried no harsh weight, yet it felt like a flashlight beam held directly against Su Jin's eyes. Su Jin, contact us immediately if you recall any additional details tonight. Understood. Such as the unidentified swordsman who rescued you. Su Jin stared down at the medic wrapping sterile bandages around his wrist. The white gauze coiled over his forearm, fully concealing the scar. I never got a clear look at him. Lu Heng dropped the line of questioning without pressing further. Silent scrutiny felt more unsettling than direct interrogation. Outside the cordon, rain hammered the asphalt, salt wind whipping up to soak his trouser legs. Su Jin sneezed again, the cold making his nasal passages burn and his eyes water. An isolation transport vehicle rumbled to a stop beside them. When the side door slid open, Su Jin caught his reflection in the tinted window glass. Matted soaked hair, a smudged ashen face, faint dried blood crusted at the corner of his mouth. No part of his appearance suggested someone who'd just come into possession of a peerless supernatural artifact. He looked far more like someone who dragged himself out of a garbage heap. Su Jin climbed into the vehicle, tucking his bandaged left wrist beneath his knees. The card casket stirred faintly within his consciousness. The Six of Spades card flickered into view for a split second before fading back into stillness. Lu Heng remained standing in the rain, exchanging quiet words with one of his field agents. Su Jin could not make out their conversation. He only watched as Lu Heng raised his phone to photograph the spade-shaped fragment sealed inside the evidence bag. 4 words were jotted onto the incident report form. Ancient Card Organization. The isolation room reeked of harsh disinfectant. Su Jin sank onto a rigid white plastic chair, a pair of ill-fitting disposable slippers sitting at his feet. They ran half a size too small. His toes pressed tight against the toe cap in constant discomfort. Uniformed officers and lab technicians paced back and forth behind the floor to ceiling observation glass. He could not hear their muffled voices, only catch glimpses of dark uniforms, white lab coats, blue manila folders, and occasional glances directed straight at him. This space bore no resemblance to a hospital ward, nor a police holding cell. A surveillance camera mounted in the corner tracked every movement. The entrance door had no interior handle. A single paper cup filled with room-temperature water sat on the empty table before him, its surface perfectly still, thin condensation fogging the glass walls. Su Jin stared at the cup for 30 full seconds. He did not take a sip. It was not fear of tampered liquid. The overwhelming stench of disinfectant coated his tongue. It made plain water taste like damp, mildewed cloth. His left wrist remained wrapped in bandages. Beneath the gauze, the king card marking lay dormant, almost undetectable. Yet the instant he focused his awareness inward, the glowing card casket materialized. It did not float in front of his physical vision. It existed entirely within his consciousness. The sensation struck him as deeply alien, as if a locked drawer had appeared unannounced inside his skull, filled with a deck of cards that never belonged to him. Su Jin closed his eyes. A monochrome long table materialized in his mental space. The king card rested atop the main seat of the table, within the spades quadrant. The six of spades glowed far brighter than the empty, surrounding card slots. Zhou Ren's voice echoed out from the card. Card bearer. Su Jin opened his eyes again. The sterile isolation room remained unchanged. The untouched water cup, the unblinking surveillance camera, all exactly as before. Can you see everything happening here? He asked silently through their bond. I can detect threats within range of your anchor bond, but I have no direct line of sight to your physical surroundings. Can you hear what I say out loud? Only when you actively activate direct card communication. Su Jin leaned back against the hard plastic chair. The rigid frame dug into the raw scrapes across his shoulder, and he drew in a slow breath before exhaling it evenly. What does channeling your power entail? The six of spades flared with a soft pale light. Zhou Ren did not answer immediately. Several beats passed before his voice resounded once more. You are not physically capable of withstanding it right now. Su Jin nearly let out a bitter laugh. Not capable. The phrase hit like a doctor delivering a grim prognosis. I don't plan on using it right this second. Su Jin rubbed the rim of the paper cup with his thumb. I just need to understand the limits, in case a life or death situation forces me to rely on it later. 1 breath's worth of channeling. How long is 1 breath? A single full inhale and exhale cycle. Su Jin drew in a breath and released it slowly. The window of power felt absurdly brief. What can I accomplish in 1 breath? Perceive the world through the eyes of a Tier 5 Esper. The line read like a cryptic riddle, and Su Jin had little patience for vague metaphors. He refocused his gaze on the surveillance camera, its dark lens fixed unwaveringly on his form. The personnel observing from outside would be tracking every twitch of his expression, every shift of his pupils. The room held no overt threats, yet every surface screamed. One clear instruction: do not act out of line. Su Jin dropped his gaze to his lap. Beneath the bandages on his wrist, the card marking pulsed with a faint, gentle stir. Let me try 1 breath of channeling. Zhou Ren's tone sharpened with warning. It will inflict severe bodily strain. If I don't test it now, I'll be even more likely to die. When I truly need it. Silence settled thick over the mental communication link. A lab technician paused outside the observation glass for a moment before walking away. Su Jin slid his hands under the table, gripping the chair's plastic edge tight. Just 1 breath. The 6 of spades fell quiet for a long moment. Cease the channeling instantly if the pain becomes unbearable. Su Jin silently wondered if stopping mid-channel would even be possible once the power flooded through him. He kept the thought unspoken. The next instant, an icy vice clamped down around his left wrist. It was not the pressure of a human hand, but the frigid weight of a sword hilt driven straight into bone. Su Jin's breath caught short, and the white walls, surveillance camera, and water cup stretched and blurred. He could see the very air itself. Not ordinary air, countless fine luminous strands, thin as human hair, drifting suspended throughout the room. Some seeped in through the crack beneath the door, others coiled constantly around his bandaged left wrist. Beyond the observation glass, each uniformed officer carried unique glows of varying brightness, as if every person harbored a dormant lantern. Wiring for the surveillance cameras snaked along the baseboards in glowing lines. A faint pale blue residue lingered suspended inside the water cup. It held no toxic properties, merely trace particles of a stabilizing energy compound. Su Jin could even discern the faint cold radiance of the king and 6 of spades marks layered over his left forearm, connected by that same fragile thread that looked ready to snap at any moment. Then the agony crashed over him in full force. His fingers clamped down hard against the plastic chair edge. A sharp cracking sound echoed as a chunk of the brittle frame split off beneath his grip. His vision snapped back to normal. The sterile isolation room returned to plain white walls and overwhelming disinfectant fumes. Su-Jin hunched forward, his forehead nearly striking the table edge. He fought back, retching, bitter acid burning raw inside his throat. Someone knocked sharply against the observation glass. "Mr. Su." Su-Jin lifted a hand in a weak, dismissing wave. "I'm fine, just lightheaded." The statement rang completely genuine. Black floaters swirled across his line of sight. His left wrist throbbed as if struck by a heavy hammer, numbness spreading all the way down to his fingertips. A shard of broken plastic chair frame embedded itself in his palm, and he stared down at the small bead of welling blood. Zhou Rin's voice resonated once more in his mind. "You cannot endure a second channeling attempt in your current state." "I understand." Su-Jin leaned back against the chair's spine. A damp patch soaked through the back of his shirt, a mix of leftover rainwater and cold sweat. Understanding the risk did nothing to erase what he'd witnessed during that single breath of power. This world was no ordinary city. The uniformed figures roaming its streets were far from regular humans. And the deck of cards clutched in his hands held the power to borrow strength that did not belong to him. Floating in the air beside the paper cup, lines of system text materialized. Borrow card permissions activated for the first time. Warning: bearer's physical vessel is too frail. Consecutive power borrows prohibited for the near term. Faction quest issued. Compile the Spectre Guest Hall roster. Su-Jin stared at the 4 characters, Spectre Guest Hall. He had not chosen this name. Not yet, at least. Yet deep within the darkness behind the main seat at the card table, a plaque had faintly lit up, as if waiting for his signature. When Su-Jin was released, dawn had broken. Pale gray light slanted through the corridor windows and spilled across the tile floor, resembling an unmopped layer of water. A staff member handed him a temporary coat. Its sleeves hung long enough to cover his wrists, perfectly concealing his left arm. He signed 3 documents. A non-disclosure notice, a temporary isolation release form, a follow-up reassessment notice. Midway through the second page, his pen tore through the paper. Su-Jin stared at the tiny hole for 2 seconds. He had pressed far too hard. His hands had not fully recovered. The female clerk processing his paperwork glanced up. "Are you feeling unwell?" "Just exhausted." She nodded and slid a plastic card across the desk to him. "Do not leave Linhai City within 3 days, and keep your phone line open. Someone will contact you for reassessment. Cooperate fully when they reach out." "What if my phone loses signal?" The clerk shot him a sharp look. Su-Jin slipped the card into his pocket. "Just joking." She did not crack a smile. "Fair enough." Agency personnel were likely not fond of late-night tales of monstrous creatures. Stepping out of the building, steam curled upward from street-side breakfast stalls. The aromas of soy milk, fried dough sticks, and rain-wet asphalt mingled, dulling the briny stench of the old port district. Su-Jin paused on the steps, his stomach growling loudly. He glanced down. Had he gone a full day without eating? Perhaps not quite 24 hours. Either way, hunger gnawed at him fiercely. He bought 2 steamed meat buns and a cup of soy milk. The piping hot filling scalded his tongue. He mumbled a quiet curse, and the elderly stall keeper glanced over. "Slow down, young man. No need to rush." Su-Jin nodded. He wanted nothing more than to take his time. But the card case tucked in his pocket hummed with a persistent chill, a silent reminder. A silent reminder. Do not pretend to be an ordinary mortal for too long. He found an empty bench at a bus stop and perched on its edge. A dental advertisement covered the back of the signboard, featuring a grinning model with blindingly white teeth. Su-Jin glanced at it, then lowered his head to take another bite. He sank his consciousness into the card case. The black and white long table materialized once more. The main seat sat empty, yet an invisible weight pressed against his shoulders, urging him forward to claim it. Most of the 52 chairs lining the table remained dim and gray. Only the 6 of spades glowed faintly. Zhou Rin did not occupy his designated seat, standing instead behind the spades row with one hand resting atop his sword hilt, a statue radiating barely contained impatience. Su-Jin walked to the front of the main seat. Its backrest towered far too high. If he sat, his feet would dangle off the ground. He held off taking a seat for the moment. At the far end of the long table, the blurry plaque floated back into view. Faction roster pending establishment. Please confirm the official name of your faction, bearer. Su-Jin swallowed the last half of his bun. Though no food existed within his mental plane, his throat still constricted as if choked. Spectre Guest Hall. Spectre from the playing card suit. Guest for every soul who crossed its threshold. It sounded like a hidden haven tucked within the city's cracks. Those who came bore cards, took seats, and played their hands. Winners claimed their rewards. Losers paid their due costs. A touch tacky, perhaps, yet strangely fitting. Sujin sank down into the main seat. The wood felt colder than he had anticipated. I confirmed the name. The characters carved into the plaque solidified bit by bit. No flashy golden light or grand fanfare. Instead, it resembled aged timber wiped clean of dust, revealing deep, dark grain beneath the grime. Spectre Guest Hall. The three words hung suspended above the long table. Outside the bus stop, a public transit vehicle rumbled to a halt, its doors creaking open. Sujin blinked back to reality and saw it was not the route he needed. Truth be told, he had no destination in mind. No family belonging to this world filled his phone's contacts, yet his ID card rested safely in his wallet. His face stared back from the photo, with a residential address listed for an old Linhai neighborhood. Had the system fabricated an entire identity for him? Thorough, to an unsettling degree. Back within the card table, new system prompts flickered to life. Spectre Guest Hall initial construction complete. Faction authorities unlocked. Main card administration, secondary card distribution, candidate card generation. Suit hierarchy confirmed. Spades, hearts, clubs, diamonds. Rank order for equivalent tiers. Spades outrank hearts, hearts outrank clubs, clubs outrank diamonds. Sujin tapped his fingertips against the side of his soy milk cup. The drink still retained its warmth. He needed to hear the full set of rules first. Otherwise, reckless card distribution would leave him blind to his own demise. What exactly are candidate cards? Several gray miniature cards surfaced across the table's surface, bearing only faint suit imprints, no numerical values. Candidate tier privileges, limited inter-member communication, distress signal transmission, assessment eligibility. Candidate tier personnel are not counted as official faction members. Exceptional talents may receive a summons to take the assessment, no exemptions permitted. Sujin paused at the line, no exemptions permitted. This rule suited him well. It eliminated the risk of fawning over every gifted newcomer and handing out cards freely, turning the faction into a market stall dishing out membership vouchers. Joran spoke up. We require more personnel. Sujin turned to face him. Now, Spectre Guest Hall holds only you and I at present. That does not sound entirely terrible. A hall devoid of members carries no influence. Sujin took another sip of soy milk, the heat stinging his tongue again. He wrinkled his nose in discomfort. A gust of wind rattled the paper bun bag resting on the bench beside him in the real world. We will seek recruits, but we cannot recruit blindly. He spoke slowly, weighing each word. To receive a card is to join the hall. If a member perishes, their card returns to the table's reservoir, yet their soul does not follow. I seek people capable of surviving, not disposable test subjects to throw into danger. Joran watched him silently. Unnerved by the unwavering gaze, Sujin added, Of course, moral character alone will not suffice. I will evaluate resources, combat aptitude, and discretion equally. The card table shook faintly. Faction core principles recorded. Spectre Guest Hall enforces covert recruitment, no public outreach. Existing members may identify potential candidates, who must pass screening and formal assessment before admission. Across the street from the bus stop, an office worker sprinted past while gnawing a pancake. Dark sauce smudged across his white-collared shirt. He glanced down at the stain, and his entire face crumpled with dismay. A faint urge to laugh tugged at Sujin's chest. Ordinary people carried on with their mundane mornings. Meanwhile, he sat on a public bench drafting bylaws for an organization unregistered with any municipal business bureau. Another system notification lit up the air. Initial low-tier candidate, cards generating. A row of tiny gray cards bobbed upward beneath the black and white table, resembling a school of half-asleep fish. Sujin reached out to brush one with his finger. Its surface was icy cold. No names etched upon them. They would wait for worthy bearers to claim them. Sujin returned to the residential address printed on his ID card. An aging 6-story complex with no elevator. By the 4th-floor landing, he leaned against the wall to catch his breath for over 10 seconds. The bruise on his knee throbbed sharply, his left wrist aching in tandem. Some resident had hung 2 pairs of shoes to dry in the stairwell. The stench of insoles mixed with cooking fumes pricked his sinuses, triggering a sneeze. The lock on the 6th-floor apartment turned smoothly. The unit was compact. 1 bedroom, 1 living room. A half-empty bag of toast sat on the dining table, alongside an outdated desktop computer and a potted green pot hose on its last legs. Utility bills were taped to the refrigerator, printed with the name Sujin, though the handwriting on the slips was not his own. He lingered in the doorway for a long moment before closing the door behind him. The apartment felt cobbled together exclusively for his benefit. Not lavish, not absurdly luxurious. Bordering on destitute, even. The system knew how to cut corners on its budget. Su-jin tossed his temporary coat over a chair and splashed cold water over his face in the bathroom sink. The reflection staring back from the mirror looked far worse than the one he had glimpsed through the transport vehicle's window. Heavy dark circles beneath his eyes, a split lip, messy hair matted as if a cat had tangled its claws through it. He dried his face with a towel that carried the faint scent of laundry detergent. This small trace of ordinary domestic warmth grounded him slightly. He booted up the computer. No password protected the desktop. Several folders lined the screen. Work, utility bills, old part-time employment, reassessment files. Su-jin opened the reassessment files folder. 2 PDF documents waited inside. Public edition of Linhai Awakened Individual Interim Management Regulations, Survivor Guidelines for Source Contamination Incidents, Public Edition. The 2 words spoke volumes. A public version meant vast swathes of critical information remained redacted. Su-jin opened the first file, gnawing on dry toast as he read. The crust scraped painfully against his molars. After 2 bites, he rummaged through the refrigerator for water, finding only a half-empty bottle of mineral water and a carton of yogurt expired 3 days prior. He lifted the yogurt, studied the printed date, and set it back on the shelf. Plain water would have to suffice. The text on screen read in stiff, official bureaucratic language. Awakened individuals. Supernatural aptitude rankings. Tier registration protocols. Source contamination. Heterogeneous suppression bureau. Su-jin dragged the mouse to scroll down, his reading pace slowing more and more. Supernatural powers existed in this world, yet they were not fully public knowledge. Ordinary citizens knew of specialized personnel, high-risk disasters, and regulated incidents. But they remained ignorant of the full, unvarnished truth. A small fraction of humanity awakened supernatural abilities around the age of 18. An even rarer subset manifested powers during follow-up assessments at 22. Aptitude rankings measured latent potential, not raw combat strength, graded from F through S, with higher unpublicized tiers rumored to exist beyond S. Combat tiers began at Tier 1 Awakened. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Domain Manifestation. Tier 5, City Guardian. Su-jin halted at this line. City Guardian tier combatants served as core responders for city-scale supernatural disasters, required to register formally and operate under stringent oversight. He chewed a mouthful of stale toast, the flavor suddenly turning bland on his tongue. Jorin was no mere bodyguard. If surveillance footage had captured that sword strike from the previous night, the fallout would be far more severe than he had anticipated. He continued scrolling. Tier 6, Star Wanderer. Tier 7, Marquis. Tier 8, Sovereign. Tier 9, Demigod. A line of question marks followed, realms far beyond his current capacity to comprehend. Su-jin reread that line 3 times over. The sections marked unpublicized invariably held the most earth-shattering secrets. A local news pop-up appeared on screen. The 5 academies' joint proficiency assessment would be held on the 23rd of June. Su-jin clicked the link. The article featured an aerial photograph of a training grounds, captioned with the names of the 5 participating institutions: Kyushu, Star Sea, Black Obsidian, White Pagoda, Heavenly Balance. The assessment opened to registered awakened individuals and select observation candidates awaiting secondary awakening screenings. He scrolled further down to the comment section, bustling with heated discussion. One user wrote that this assessment served as a second chance at life after the National College Entrance Exam. Another claimed anyone with an S-tier aptitude was guaranteed admission to the 5 elite academies. Others ranted about corporate-backed quota spots, complaining that ordinary awakened citizens could never compete for limited resources. Su-jin fixated on the comment claiming S-tier aptitude guarantees academy entry, recalling the line from the power system file. Aptitude rankings only measure latent potential. A wide gap separated public online commentary from the unwritten true rules of this world. Within that gap lurked countless hidden players and countless concealed blades. The card case within his consciousness vibrated softly. Primary access to faction resource repository unlocked for review. Su-jin set down his mineral water bottle. The black and white card table unfurled once more. A small black chest materialized atop its surface, holding several items within. 3 purifying source marrows, 5 stabilizing source crystals, 12 low-tier candidate cards, 1 blueprint for basic source artifacts. Su-jin's gaze locked onto the purifying source marrows. A brief system description accompanied the item. Suppresses low-grade source contamination, stabilizes awakening processes, extremely scarce through unregulated channels. Extremely scarce. He appreciated that phrase deeply, not out of greed. Rather, a fledgling faction could not lure talented recruits with nothing but vague promises of mystery. Mystery held no tangible value. Life-saving rare resources carried all the bargaining power. Zhou Ren's voice echoed across the mental plane. The 5 Academies assessment will gather all of Linhai's young awakened individuals in one location. Su Jin tied the open toast bag closed. It will also draw every form of trouble in the city. Trouble brings people of potential. Many among those people will themselves become trouble. Zhou Ren offered no retort. Su Jin unlocked his cell phone and pulled up the follow-up text message sent by the Heterogeneous Suppression Bureau. He was forbidden from leaving Linhai for 3 days. The 5 Academies assessment was scheduled 5 days away. The old port contamination incident and the assessment fell suspiciously close on the calendar, far too aligned to be mere coincidence. He flipped the phone face down onto the table. The pothose plant beside him wilted, its leaf edges turned sickly yellow. Su Jin reached out to brush its foliage aside. The soil was bone-dry. He stood to fetch water and poured a slow stream around the plant's roots. The liquid seeped into the compacted earth at a glacial pace. "We start by gathering intelligence," he spoke aloud. "On what subjects?" "The old port district, the black source liquid, the 5 Academies assessment, and any recent cases of missing young awakened individuals within Linhai." Zhou Ren asked. "Once we find them." Su Jin's eyes drifted to the training grounds photograph on the computer screen, filled with teenagers grinning as if their lives held endless promise. He moved his cursor to the search bar. "We determine who is worthy of receiving a candidate card." The follow-up call arrived far sooner than Su Jin had anticipated. 3:06 p.m. He had just poured boiling water into his instant noodle cup, his fork still pressed against the lid to trap steam, when his phone buzzed. An unfamiliar Linhai area code flashed across the screen. Su Jin glanced at the unopened bowl of braised beef noodles, seasoning packets fully emptied inside. The phone continued vibrating relentlessly. He sighed and accepted the call. "Su Jin." The voice sounded familiar. "Lu Heng. Speaking. I have a few supplementary details to clarify with you. Are you available right now?" Su Jin glanced back at his forgotten noodles. "I am free." His meal was not, but he had no choice but to comply. 30 minutes later, he sat inside an interrogation room at the Linhai branch of the Heterogeneous Suppression Bureau. The same stark white walls, the same ceiling surveillance cameras. No warm water sat on the table this time. A voice recorder had been placed before him, its red recording light glowing like a watchful small eye. Lu Heng sat across the table, a manila folder resting at his elbow. Su Jin could still smell the residual instant noodle seasoning clinging to his fingertips. He had rushed out too quickly to wash his hands. A thoroughly undignified state of affairs. "Do not be nervous," Lu Heng said. Su Jin shot him a glance. Lines like that only ever heightened anxiety. "Last night, you stated you could not clearly see the person who rescued you." Lu Heng opened the folder. "I wish to confirm whether you overheard any words they spoke." Su Jin's fingers tapped lightly against his knee. He had heard a phrase clearly, "Await the bearer's command." He could never admit that aloud. "The wind howled too loudly," Su Jin replied. "And the monster's shrieks drowned everything out. I only caught them telling me to run." Lu Heng jotted a note on his paperwork. Male voice. Most likely. Age range. I could not make out any distinguishing features. Clothing. Entirely black. Lu Heng lifted his head. "A blade." Su Jin hesitated a split second. "It resembled a sword blade." "What do you mean, resembled?" The movement was too swift to follow. That much was the unvarnished truth. Zhou Ren's sword drew so fast Su Jin had only witnessed the aftermath of each strike. Lu Heng slid the folder a little closer across the table. Several printed photographs peeked out from inside. Su Jin's fingers curled inward before he could stop them. Warehouse concrete floors. Mutilated monster remains. A burnt spade-shaped imprint etched into the ground. A metal storage gate sliced clean through. The photos captured every detail with brutal clarity. The spade mark branded into the charred concrete stood out far more prominently than Su Jin had recalled seeing in person. Zhou Ren had left behind evidence far too obvious to overlook. "Have you seen this symbol before?" Lu Heng questioned. Su Jin leaned back against his chair, the scrapes on his shoulder blades stinging sharply under the pressure. He clung to that minor pain to steady his expression. "I saw it for the very first time yesterday." "Did your rescuer bear a similar marking on their person?" "I did not pay attention to their attire." "Are you familiar with the name Spectre Guest Hall?" Su Jin's index finger froze mid-tap against his thigh. Dead silence filled the interrogation room. The air conditioning vent hummed monotonously, as if clogged with years of accumulated dust. He lifted his gaze. What hall? Lu Heng stared intently at him. Su Jin met his gaze evenly. Do not blink too rapidly. Do not hold eye contact rigidly stiff. Deception fell apart the moment one overacted. Lu Heng pulled out a faded photocopy of an old archive file, its edges yellowed, and large sections of text blacked out with ink redaction blocks. Su Jin could only discern fragmented words through the smudges. Card. Hall. Ancient civilization. Old archival records reference a symbol matching this imprint, Lu Heng explained. It may hold no connection to your incident. Su Jin stared down at the tattered copy, a ridiculous thought bubbling up in his mind. He had only officially confirmed the name Spectre Guest Hall that morning. How could ancient archives already contain traces of it? The system offered no explanation. The card case within his mind remained silent, feigning ignorance. Fine, it excelled at pretending nothing was amiss. Su Jin slid the photocopy back. I have never heard of it. Lu Heng pressed onward. Why did this individual choose to save you? Perhaps it was merely a coincidence of timing. Coincidence that they single-handedly slew a Tier 1 source-contaminated aberration. They rescued 2 other survivors alongside me. The other 2 witnesses confirmed the rescuer never strayed far from your side. Su Jin fell silent. That middle-aged investigator had far too many supplementary details to share. He dropped his gaze to his hands, the faint seasoning scent still lingering on his skin. Maybe the monster focused its attacks on me more fiercely. Lu Heng paused writing, his pen hovering above the page. After several long seconds, he closed the folder shut. You are incredibly fortunate. Su Jin nodded. I believe that as well. Those blessed with such luck ought to fully cooperate with follow-up reassessments. I understand completely. The interrogation lasted 20 minutes total. Lu Heng pressed him for countless minute details. The exact spot he regained consciousness, the positions of the other survivors, the monster's pursuit path, and the physical sensation when the black source liquid touched his wrist. Su Jin disclosed every harmless memory he possessed. Any knowledge tied to Spectre Guest Hall he obscured behind claims of blurred, trauma-fogged recollection. It was perfectly reasonable for someone traumatized by a monster attack to struggle recalling precise details. Stepping out of the interrogation room, he spotted a vending machine at the corridor's far end. His instant noodles sat untouched back at the apartment. Hunger gnawed at his stomach painfully. He inserted coins to buy a can of black coffee. The pull tab popped open with a faint fizz of carbonation. The drink tasted dreadful, cloyingly sweet on the palate, yet Su Jin drained half the can. Down the opposite end of the corridor, Lu Heng spoke with a fellow bureau agent. Su Jin could not make out their conversation, only watch as Lu Heng slid the photograph of the spade-shaped residue into a sealed file pouch stamped with a bright red classification label. He glanced down at his cell phone screen, a new system notification popping into view. External authorities have documented traces linked to Spectre Guest Hall. Faction notoriety level, rumor tier. New quest issued. Extend the first candidate invitation. Su Jin squeezed the coffee can hard enough to crumple its metal sides. A sharp crinkling sound echoed off the hallway walls. His hall had not even established its foundations, yet outside forces were already compiling files on its existence. Su Jin held off on sending the invitation right away. He headed home and ate the bucket of instant noodles that had turned soggy from soaking too long. The noodles clumped into a solid mass, snapping cleanly every time he lifted them with chopsticks. The broth had gone cold, a layer of oil floating on top like a thin sheet of wax. It tasted terrible, but with something lining his stomach, his hands stopped shaking so badly. He booted up his computer and ran searches one after another. Linghai Missing Awakeners, North Bay Old Harbor Blackwater, Fifth Institute Assessment Leaked Roster. Public web pages yielded nothing useful. All that popped up were official incident statements, official refutations, and snarky forum posts. Su Jin scrolled until 6 in the evening, his eyes burning dry and sore. Downstairs outside the window, a couple erupted into a shouting match. The man insisted he hadn't scraped her electric scooter. The woman claimed the surveillance footage captured everything clearly. They bickered for more than 10 minutes, and Su Jin unwillingly learned their property management hotline was perpetually unreachable. 2 security cameras on Building 3 were broken, and the owner of the breakfast stall next door was surnamed Lu. It was ordinary, mundane life. A world entirely separate from the subjects he'd been researching. The card case vibrated suddenly. The 6 of spades glowed to life. Ryzen's voice echoed through it. We're being tailed. Su Jin froze mid-click on his mouse. Who's following whom? The survivor from the old harbor, that teenage boy. Su Jin paused for a moment before recalling the lanky young man. Someone's trailing him. Yes. A small black and white sketch materialized on his desktop. It was no video feed. More like a rough outline Ryzen had traced using his sensory aura. Streets, alley entrances, a bus stop, and a single red-marked dot. Beside the dot was a name, Lin Che. Su Jin stared at the name. A student. A survivor of the Old Harbor disaster. Being hunted. Can you identify the people tailing him? Two low-tier ability wielders reeking of pollutant corruption. Pollutants. Su Jin rubbed the corners of his tired eyes. Here we go again. He shut his laptop and grabbed his jacket. Halfway to the front door, he stepped back, tore off a tissue, and wiped his mouth. The greasy instant noodle odor still clung to his lips. He couldn't meet others reeking of braised beef broth. Linghai's nights were far damper than its days. Su Jin took the bus to North Bay Old Street. There were few passengers aboard. A child in the back row watched cartoons on a tablet with the volume cranked high. A pink pig rolling around in mud and laughing on screen. He listened for 2 stops. The jingle was annoyingly catchy. When he stepped off the bus, a system map like perception lit up inside his mind. The 6 of spades marked out a directional bearing, and Su Jin wove his way down the alleys. He didn't order Ryzen to eliminate the trackers outright. A 5th-order city warden taking down 2 low-tier wielders would be overkill. Like dousing a potted plant with a fire engine. It would draw far too much attention, and the Bureau of Anomaly Suppression would inevitably show up. Down one alley sat a shuttered auto repair shop, its rolling metal shutter plastered with handwritten flyers. Drainage unclogging. Locksmith services. Traditional bone setting massage. Lin Che stood right in front of the shop, a black hoodie pulled over his school uniform with the hood drawn low over his face. He clutched a convenience store plastic bag. A carton of milk and 2 rice balls peeked out from the top. He looked nothing like a prodigy, just a worn-out high school student pulling an all-nighter to finish homework. The 2 men shadowing him at the alley mouth stuck out like sore thumbs. One chewed a cigarette, the other pretended to scroll his phone. Yet their eyes never strayed far from Lin Che. A thin black line snaked up the cigarette smoker's back of the hand, resembling a tattoo, yet writhing, as if alive. Su Jin watched them from halfway across the street. What's special about Lin Che? Ryzen replied. Shadow vein aptitude. Unregistered, unstable. Perfect fit for the club suit faction. How could you tell? His shadow is unnatural. Su Jin glanced down at Lin Che's feet. Streetlights stretched every person's shadow long across the pavement, but Lin Che's was distinct. Its edges far darker than ordinary shadows, a puddle of ink that occasionally shrank back against the brick wall. Lin Che seemed to notice the oddity himself. His grip on the plastic bag tightened until the plastic crinkled sharply under his fingers. The 2 stalkers closed in. Su Jin lingered by the convenience store glass door, using its reflection to observe their advance. Intervene right now? He could, but how would he explain his involvement afterward? The Tower of Cardholders needed its first official invitation, not a random act of street rescue. He slipped a gray preliminary card out of his pocket. The cardstock was thin, cold as a shard of ice. Xingang preliminary invitation eligible for dispatch. Xingang target. Lin Che. Xingang, a blank gray slot in the club suit section of his mental card table flickered faintly. Su Jin hesitated before sending it. He watched Lin Che set the convenience store bag against the wall and step forward a few paces. The 2 trackers halted as well. Lin Che spoke, his voice broken by the hum of passing traffic. Stop following me. I don't have any money. The cigarette smoker chuckled. We're not here to shake you down for cash, kid. Lin Che stumbled backward. His shadow did not retreat with him. It pressed flat against the wall, like a cornered small beast with nowhere left to run. Su Jin pressed his fingertip against the preliminary card. Shadow vein. Unexplored power. Rift exposure. He turned these thoughts over in his head, examining every angle as one might flip a coin to inspect both sides. Club suit faction. Dispatch the invitation. The gray card vanished inside his pocket. Lin Che's shadow trembled lightly beneath his feet. A tiny black card surfaced from the base of the wall and drifted down to land flat against his palm. Lin Che's head shot down in shock. A single line of text was printed across its surface. Xingang preliminary invitation to the Tower of Cardholders. Xingang accept, or discard. Xingang. Lin Che lifted his head, his eyes darting rapidly across every corner of the street. Su Jin stood bathed in the convenience store's fluorescent light, pretending to study the chewing gum display rack. The cigarette smoker caught the faint glow emanating from the card too. His grin vanished instantly. What's that thing in your hand? Lin Che crumpled the card into his uniform sleeve. The milk carton inside his discarded bag tipped over, white liquid dripping steadily onto the pavement from the bag's torn corner. Su Jin walked over and bought a box of peppermint candy. The cash register beeped once as he paid. A system notification surfaced in his consciousness. Xing'an first preliminary invitation successfully dispatched. Xing'an warning. Target is being hunted by a corruption-affiliated organization. Xing'an. Su Jin tore open the candy wrapper. A sharp chill spread across his tongue. Perfect. This invitation was already a highly sought commodity. Lin Che did not accept the offer immediately. Clutching the preliminary card tight in his fist, he spun on his heel and ran. He sprinted fast, the hem of his school uniform flapping in the wind. He abandoned the convenience store bag entirely, milk trailing a white streak all the way to the alley entrance. The two trackers froze for half a second, cursed, and gave chase. Su Jin lingered at the shop entrance, shifting the peppermint candy to the side of his cheek. Its cooling bite stung harshly. Aren't you going to save him? Ryzen's voice came through the six of spades. I am. Su Jin stuffed the empty candy wrapper into his pocket. But he can't think this card is a free safety charm. The words sounded cold even to his own ears. He disliked the harsh sentiment. Yet the Tower of Cardholders could not operate as a permanent rescue service starting with its very first recruit. The tower offered choices, resources, a path forward, but it could not walk every mile in their place. Lin Che veered into a narrow, unlit side alley. Su Jin followed at a safe distance. No streetlights lined this passage, discarded cardboard boxes and beer bottles stacked against the walls. The air reeked of cat urine, cut through by the cumin aroma drifting from a barbecue stall around the bend. The contrast felt surreal, someone fleeing for their life ahead, while crowds queued for grilled squid mere steps away. Linghai was a city split clean in two, like a pair of trousers stitched together with mismatched fabric. Lin Che skidded to a halt at a dead end. The two trackers blocked the only exit. The cigarette smoker tossed his butt onto the ground and ground it out beneath his shoe sole. Hand over whatever you've got, kid. Don't make us force it out of you, yeah? Lin Che pressed his back flat against the brick wall, gasping for air. Who exactly are you people? Mind your own business. The second man, who'd pretended to scroll his phone, laughed dryly. Unregistered wielders like you disappear without anyone asking questions. You don't understand your own worth. We'll sell your power for a fair price, and everyone walks away happy. Su Jin lingered in the shadowed mouth of the alley, unseen. Sell him for a profit. He pressed the peppermint candy against the roof of his mouth. Its cool mint faded, leaving only a bitter aftertaste on his tongue. Lin Che's shadow began to stir. The movement subtle at first. The dark mass clinging to the wall stretched outward an inch, then recoiled again, like a hesitant hand afraid to strike. The cigarette smoker raised one hand, the black line on his back of the hand swelling into a thin, jagged spike. Lin Che squeezed the preliminary card so hard his knuckles whitened. The card glowed faintly. Xing'an, do you accept the preliminary invitation to the Tower of Cardholders? Xing'an. Lin Che could not see Su Jin hidden in the dark, but Su Jin caught the strained whisper forced from his throat. I accept. The gray card's surface bloomed with faint club suit filigree. It was not an official two of clubs, merely a preliminary tier card. A status panel for Lin Che materialized before Su Jin's eyes. Xing'an club suit recruit. Lin Che. Xing'an permissions. 1 distress signal, limited cross-card communication, trial assessment eligibility. Xing'an active request. Distress signal activated. Xing'an. Lin Che had wasted no time figuring out how to use its functions. Su Jin raised a hand, tapping the card case tucked inside his coat pocket. Ryzen's voice sounded. Shall I handle them? Don't unleash your full power. Pardon, just show them a fraction of your strength. Ryzen fell silent for a beat. The temperature inside the alley plummeted the next instant. The cigarette smoker had just stepped forward when a spade-shaped blade mark sliced across the ground at his feet. It was shallow, barely half an inch deep. Yet the pavement split open along the cut, gravel spraying outward in all directions. The man froze mid-step, his shoe hovering an inch above the ground. His face paled with alarm. Who's there? No answer came. A faint translucent silhouette of the six of spades floated out of the darkness. The card's outline was thin and faint. Still, the two trackers froze as though an invisible hand clamped around their throats. Their movements sluggish as they attempted to retreat. Hidden at the alley mouth, Su Jin spoke directly to Lin Che through the card's communication channel. 3 steps left, duck your head. Lin Che hesitated for a split second. He reacted fast all the same, darting left and dropping low on the 3rd step. A black energy spike whistled past his hair and embedded itself deep in the brick wall, plaster crumbling down in showers. The cigarette smoker tried to lunge after him. A second blade mark carved the pavement inches in front of his knee. This one far closer. Flying gravel nicked his cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. High-tier card imprint. The phone-scrolling man's voice cracked with terror. Retreat. They fled far faster than they'd arrived. Lin Che slid down the wall to sit on the ground, the glowing preliminary card clutched to his chest. He gasped like a winded bellows, a scrape torn open across the back of his hand, blood dripping down his knuckles to splatter the concrete. Su Jin waited until the two men vanished entirely before stepping into the dead-end alley. Lin Che's head shot upward in shock. You're the one. Su Jin set the abandoned convenience store bag beside him. The milk had spilled out completely. Only the two rice balls remained intact. Yours. Lin Che glanced between the crumpled plastic bag and Su Jin's face. The Tower of Cardholders? Su Jin did not confirm his identity outright. He knelt down, a sharp twinge shooting through his knee as his trousers pulled taut over a hidden wound. Pausing briefly to steady himself. Recruits with preliminary cards hold no official tower membership. Lin Che blinked in confusion. What does that mean? The card you carry grants one distress signal, entry to the assessment trials, and the option to walk away. You still have a chance to turn this down. Lin Che tightened his grip on the card. What if I don't walk away? Then you await the assessment trials. What will the trials test? Su Jin's gaze fixed on the faint club suit pattern etched across Lin Che's card. They'll judge whether you seek only a safe haven to hide behind, or whether you dare sit down at the card table and play the game. Lin Che's atoms apple-bobbed nervously. He clearly had dozens of questions burning on his tongue, yet none slipped past his lips. Su Jin pushed himself back to his feet. Standing too quickly sent a wave of blackness across his vision. He grabbed the brick wall for balance, coating his palm in gritty gray plaster dust. This place was filthy. He'd need to scrub his hands thoroughly once he got home. A system alert popped up in his mind. Xingang Preliminary Recruit, rules formalized. Xingang low-tier preliminary cards may be transferred to high-ranking tower members for safekeeping. Xingang Su Jin turned his focus to the six of spades resting in his mental card space. Ryzen, I'm here. I'm assigning 3 low-tier spade preliminary cards to your custody. You may seek out potential recruits, but no candidate skips the tower assessment trials. Understood. Su Jin walked out of the alley. Lin Che called out suddenly from behind him. How do I contact you afterward? Su Jin did not look back. He lifted his left hand slightly. The club suit preliminary card resting in Lin Che's palm flickered with soft light. Through the card. He barely reached the street corner before Ryzen's voice echoed through the card case once more. There's another detail you need to know. Speak. The two men carried markings of the Black Thorn congregation. They've been collecting copies of the 5th Institute assessment roster. Su Jin halted beside the barbecue stall. Thick clouds of cooking smoke washed over his face. The stall vendor called out. Young man, want spicy squid? Su Jin stared at the slabs of squid sizzling atop the metal griddle, grease popping loudly. No spice. He paused a beat longer. I won't buy anything. The vendor rolled his eyes in annoyance. Su Jin paid him no mind. The 5th Institute assessment roster. The Blackwater incident at the Old Harbor. Unregistered prodigy wielders. All these threads were converging onto a single table. Su Jin had irritated the squid vendor. Lingering by a food stall without buying anything was undeniably rude. He walked a few paces forward and pulled out his phone again. The screen blazed harshly against the dim night air, battery stuck at 19%. He hadn't charged it since the previous night. It was a miracle the device had lasted this long. Lin Che trailed roughly 3 meters behind him. Trailed was too strong a word. He moved like a stray cat newly rescued from the streets, longing to draw near, yet terrified of being pushed away. The edge of the club suit preliminary card peeked out from his uniform cuff, his finger constantly pressing it flat as though afraid it might float away. Su Jin stopped outside the convenience store entrance. Go home. Lin Che stared blankly. Huh. Head back, shower, eat something, get some rest. Don't go to school tomorrow, and don't wander the streets alone. What about those 2 men who chased me? They won't hunt you down again anytime soon. Lin Che studied his face. How can you be certain? Su Jin glanced back toward the dark alley. The 2 Black Thorn congregation thugs had fled far off, Ryzen's cold aura clinging to their tracks. The 6 of spades had spared their lives, leaving only a lingering icy dread trailing them. For low-tier ability wielders, that fear would be enough to haunt their sleep tonight. A hunch. Lin Che parted his lips to ask another question. Su Jin held up a hand to cut him off. Don't dig for more answers than you need. The preliminary card will keep us connected. Focus on staying alive until the assessment trials. His words offered little comfort, yet Lin Che nodded all the same. He took a few steps away, then glanced over his shoulder. Will the Tower of Cardholders truly accept me? Su Jin slipped his phone back into his pocket. That depends entirely on you. Lin Che stood frozen for 2 full seconds, clutching his leaking milk-stained plastic bag, before turning and disappearing down the cross street. Su Jin watched his silhouette vanish at the intersection, then stepped back into the convenience store to purchase a charging cable and the cheapest portable power bank they stocked. At checkout, the clerk asked, "Would you like a plastic bag?" "No thanks." He reconsidered halfway through handing over his payment. "Actually, give me one." The power bank's rigid cardboard packaging dug uncomfortably into his palm. He arrived home at 11 o'clock that night. Su Jin filled the electric kettle and set it to boil. While waiting for the water to heat, he typed Lin Che's name into a new computer document. Xing'an Lin Che, Club Suit Preliminary Recruit, Shadow Vein Aptitude, Old Harbor Disaster Survivor, targeted by Black Thorn Congregation. Xing'an, after finishing the entry, his gaze lingered on the phrase Black Thorn Congregation. He possessed far too little information on the group. Public search engines yielded nothing substantial. Only a handful of deleted forum threads referenced a black market operating in North Bay, where users traded pollutant-infested materials using black thorn as a coded signal. The posts had been swiftly removed, only their titles preserved in web cache. Ryzen's intel was far more direct. The 2 low-tier wielders carried official markings of the Black Thorn Congregation. Su Jin massaged his throbbing temples. The kettle clicked, automatically cutting power once the water boiled. He poured hot water over a cheap green tea bag dug out of the kitchen cabinet. The brew tasted strongly of cardboard packaging. He took one sip and froze, expression tight with distaste. What kind of miserable life had the apartment's previous tenant led? The card case vibrated against his chest. A faint gray glow flickered from one of the diamond suit preliminary cards stored within. Su Jin pulled open his mental card table. A thin stream of information unfolded across its surface. Xing'an Diamond Suit Preliminary Card unlocks one-time intelligence extraction. Xing'an cost. 1 stabilized source crystal. Xing'an. Su Jin checked his resource inventory. 5 stabilized source crystals remained in reserve. Every use depleted 1 permanently. He curled his fingers around the warm ceramic mug, its sides radiating heat against his palms. Ryzen, is there a way to gather this intel without expending a crystal? We can search manually, but it will take time. How much time? We risk missing the roster trade entirely. Su Jin set the mug down on the counter. Resources meant nothing hoarded away. They only became vital assets when spent at the right moment. Activate the extraction. 1 stabilized source crystal dimmed and vanished from his inventory reserve. The Diamond Suit Preliminary card flipped open, projecting fragmented grainy footage like an old malfunctioning security camera feed, filled with static distortion and frame skips. Location: North Bay Underground Black Market, an underground parking garage. Several masked figures clustered around an open van, stacks of sealed file bags piled high inside its cargo hold. No audio accompanied the feed. Only transcribed text pulled directly from the scene by the system floated across the screen. Xing'an 5th Institute Assessment Observation Roster. Xing'an Supplementary Roster of Unregistered Awakeners. Xing'an Survivor Roster from the Old Harbor Incident. Xing'an. When Su Jin read the final label, his spine stiffened straight. The footage zoomed in on the bottom of the printed list. A single name sat there. Su Jin. Annotation: Witness to Spade Incident. Suspected contact with unidentified high-tier card lineage wielder. He stared at the line of text, half his cup of tea gone cold. Perfect. The tower hadn't even formally opened its doors, yet its founder's name was already circulating on black market target rosters. Another system notification surfaced. Xing'an Black Thorn Congregation actively hunting all individuals listed on the assessment rosters. Xing'an Tower Faction Mission updated. Trace the original source of the leaked rosters. Xing'an. Su Jin reopened his Word document and typed a new line beneath Lin Che's entry. Xing'an Black Thorn Congregation Target Pool. All unregistered awakeners, Old Harbor Disaster Survivors, and names featured on the 5th Institute assessment rosters. Xing'an. He saved the file. The computer auto-generated a file name. Tower of Cardholders Recruit Roster. Su Jin stared at those 4 words displayed on screen. His fingers hovered motionless over the keyboard. The only sounds filling the quiet apartment were the low hum of the computer's cooling fan and the distant drone of the refrigerator compressor. The constant white noise suddenly felt unbearably loud. Su Jin slept for 3 hours. Not a minute more. At 7 in the morning, renovations downstairs kicked off, right on schedule. The drill bit tore through the floorboards, like a needle stabbing straight into his skull. When he opened his eyes, his phone lay smashed against his chest, its screen still glowing. He'd passed out mid-research the night before. A thin indentation from his charging cord marked his cheek. Su Jin sat up, his lower back and neck throbbing with ache. The bandage wrapped around his left wrist had slipped half a loop, revealing a sliver of black gold card pattern beneath, which faded away in an instant. He headed to the bathroom to brush his teeth. He squeezed out far too much toothpaste. The sharp mint jolted him half awake. In the mirror, his complexion looked marginally better than yesterday, though barely. Dark purple shadows lingered under his eyes, and a thin scab crusted over the split on his lip. Su Jin stared at his reflection for 2 seconds, then reached up to flatten his messy hair. It did nothing, only made it wilder. Whatever. He returned to his desk and opened the register of Spectral Pavilion. Only 2 names were listed. Su Jin, Lin Che. 6 of Spades was not a physical member of the organization, and Dayblade was a projection granted by the system, human-shaped, yet not truly human. The group had only just been founded, its roster embarrassingly sparse on paper. But the card table that existed within his consciousness was anything but bare. Su Jin closed his eyes and stepped into the table's realm. The words Spectral Pavilion hung suspended overhead, and the 4 seating zones lining the table were far clearer than they'd been the previous day. The Spades section sat closest to the master's seat. Its chair backs bore sharp, angular lines like rows of unsheathed blades. The Hearts zone was quieter, fine vein-like textures etched across its chairs, mimicking pulsing blood flow. The club's section's floor sank deeper, its edges melting into shadow. The Diamonds area was the most orderly, tiny grid compartments floating beneath its tabletop like filing cabinets. Su Jin stood beside the master seat and brushed a hand along the table's edge. Cold. Compile the rules. The card casket responded instantly. Suit hierarchy. Spades outrank hearts, which outrank clubs, which outrank diamonds. Spades, assault, execution, decapitation. Hearts, healing, mental stabilization, warding, pollution calming. Clubs, exploration, sealing, rift operations. Diamonds, intelligence, resource allocation, tech development, logistics. Card ranks 2 through 10 correspond to Tier 1 to Tier 9. Jack, Queen, King. Ace holds super tier authority. Joker card, the sole primary card belonging to the card bearer. Su Jin read through each clause as he typed them into a computer document. He typed quickly, but his fingers paused when he reached Jack, Queen, King, Ace. Super tier. Thinking about that now was far too premature. It was like buying a beat-up electric scooter and immediately looking up prices for private jets. Pointless. He needed to manage the 2 cards already in his possession first. What about reservists? Reservist status available for all suits ranked 9 and below. Reservists hold no official card seat and are excluded from organizational tier rankings. Reservist privileges, limited inter-card communication, 1 emergency distress signal, eligibility for assessment entry. Upon an official cardholder's death, their card automatically returns to the casket once formally bestowed. Cards return to the casket upon death. Su Jin fixed his gaze on those 4 words. The card would come back. The person would not. He highlighted that line bold in the document. As he clicked his mouse, he thought of the tattooed man dragged out the side door the night prior. The man had mumbled that his mother waited for him to bring home medicine. He had no idea if it was a lie, yet the sentence stuck in his throat like a fishbone. Su Jin massaged the space between his brows. Dayblade stood behind the Spade seats. Overly detailed rules will slow operations. Vague rules breed chaos. No one will pause mid-battle to flip through a rulebook. That's why we document everything clearly in peacetime. Dayblade fell silent. Su Jin finished typing the final clause. Promotion rule. Members may apply for a new card upon advancing tier. A superior administers the assessment, and the card bearer or authorized delegate distributes the new card. He paused, then added a supplementary line. Low-tier cards may be temporarily managed by mid to high-ranking staff, yet the ultimate right of retrieval belongs solely to the Joker card. The moment he finished writing, the card table rumbled faintly. A system notification surfaced. Spectral Pavilion Foundational Framework established. Organizational rating, unranked. Note: 5th-tier combatants are unrecorded in public archives, not counted toward formal stable physical membership scale. Su Jin stared at the label unranked. He nearly laughed out of frustration. He commanded a 5th-tier guardian, yet the organization was still unranked. Still, it made sense when he thought it through. An organization could not rely solely on intimidating power. Dayblade could suppress any conflict single-handedly, but he could not fill rosters, run logistics, investigate black markets, manage resources, or assess new recruits for him. Su Jin exited the card table and picked up his water glass. The water had gone cold. He took a sip, his stomach hollow and aching with hunger. His phone vibrated on the desk. Lin Shay sent the first message via Inter-Card Consciousness link, not a text message, but a string of wobbly script floating directly in his mind. I dreamed of a table last night. Is that normal? Su Jin stared at the words for a long moment before replying. It's normal. Do not touch any cards resting on the table. A response came immediately. May I ask, what exactly is your organization? Su Jin pulled up his computer document and glanced at the newly typed title, Spectral Pavilion. He typed a reply. Wait until you pass the assessment, then you may ask about us. Lin Shay went quiet for hours, only sending another line that afternoon. Do I have to pay to take the assessment? Su Jin nearly spilled his cold water reading the line. He typed back, no fee required. Another message popped up seconds later. Do I need to sign an indenture contract then? Su Jin leaned back against his chair and stared at the ceiling for 2 full seconds. The teenager had been badly traumatized by the black market traffickers, or he simply had an overactive imagination. No contract needed. What do you stand to gain from all this? Su Jin did not answer right away. His gaze drifted to the small glass vial sitting on his desk, purifying essence. When he'd retrieved it from the system resource vault, it was no longer than his index finger, holding a thin pool of silvery, white liquid inside its clear walls. The fluid was sparse. Tiny flecks of light sank to the bottom when he shook it. It did not look like medicine at all, more like a luxury cosmetic sample. If he tried to sell it on the open market, its packaging would never convince anyone of its value. Yet the system description was unambiguous. Suppresses low-tier corruption, stabilizes awakening resonance, nearly impossible to acquire through unregulated channels. Su Jin set the vial in his desk drawer, then pulled it out again. Should he give it to Lin Shay? It was too soon. But without it, he had no meaningful incentive to offer. Spectral Pavilion had no reputation to speak of, only inherent danger. Convincing a teenager fresh off an abduction attempt to trust a mysterious card, a vivid dream, and a vague assessment was unrealistic. Su Jin opened the Inter-Card link. You were marked by a corrupted entity last night. Your shadow vein is unstable. Within 3 days, you may develop fever, chronic insomnia, and erratic shadow movement. Lin Shay replied instantly. How do you know I didn't sleep last night? Su Jin tapped his fingertips rhythmically against the desk surface. A guess. Another guess? Su Jin lifted the vial of purifying essence and held it up to the window light. The silvery liquid slid slowly down the glass walls. Spectral Pavilion can advance you 1 vial of purifying essence, alone, not a free gift. This time, Lin Shay stayed silent for a very long while. Purifying essence? Is this real? You've heard of it? Our school's awakening instructor mentioned it. He said it only circulates internally at the 5th Academy's affiliated hospital and the Anomaly Suppression Bureau. A single vial equals 10 years of my parents' combined wages. Su Jin lingered on the phrase, 10 years. The tiny glass vial suddenly felt far heavier in his hand. This was no candy, no ordinary tonic. In the wrong hands, it was a resource powerful enough to unlock countless forbidden doors. Terms of the advance loan. Su Jin typed. 1. You must complete Spectral Pavilion's initial assessment. 2. You must never disclose the existence of the cards or this resource to anyone. 3. If you fail the assessment, the resource debt remains, to be repaid through future assigned missions. Lin Shay fell silent again. Su Jin did not press for a reply. He stood and walked to the kitchen to find something to eat. The cabinet held a pack of dried noodles, half a jar of chili sauce, and 2 eggs. He shook the eggs, still fresh. Su Jin filled a pot to boil water for noodles, and as he waited for it to heat, Lin Shay's reply arrived. Can I ask first, will I die? Su Jin watched the tiny bubbles rising along the pot's bottom. He could not give a careless answer to that question. He was no doctor, no saint, certainly not an unfeeling game NPC. Dayblade's voice echoed beside him. His shadow vein corruption is mild. 1 vial of purifying essence will fully suppress it. Su Jin asked, what if he refuses to take it? What if he refuses to take it? 30% chance of full corruption rampancy, 70% chance of permanent latent damage. 30%. Su Jin cracked the eggs into the boiling water. Egg white billowed out in messy pale clouds. An ugly sight. He messaged Lin Shay back. Left untreated, there is significant risk. With treatment, you will at least sleep soundly tonight. Lin Shay sent a string of ellipses, then a single line. I accept the assessment. Su Jin turned off the stove and drained the noodles into a bowl. The ceramic burned his palms. He set the bowl on the desk and pulled out a blank club's reservist card. The vial of purifying essence dissolved into the card's surface. Intra-card storage activated. This was Su Jin's first time using the storage function. It felt like slipping an object through a thin layer of cold water. When he released his grip, The glass vial vanished, leaving a faint silvery marking etched onto the card's face. He sent the stored resource through the consciousness link to Lin Che. A soft gasp echoed from Lin Che's and seconds later. It actually arrived. Follow the usage instructions to take it. There are instructions for this stuff? Su Jin copied the system's auto-generated dosage guide word for word into the message box. Half the vial, before bed, do not chug it all at once. Lin Che replied, understood. A moment later, another message appeared. Thank you. Su Jin lifted his chopsticks to take a bite of noodles. They had clumped together into a sticky mass. He chewed a mouthful, unsalted, tasting like warm cardboard. Oh well, it was edible at least. A system alert popped up unbidden. Rare resource dispersed. Reservist Lin Che's trust level increased. Warning, resource transfer signature may draw scrutiny from external factions. Su Jin stared at that final line. The noodles in his mouth suddenly tasted even blander. Just as he'd suspected. Valuable resources were never merely beneficial. They carried danger alongside their utility. Lin Che drank half the vial of purifying essence. The effect set in rapidly. Through the inter-card link, Su Jin received a blurry stream of vital feedback. Body temperature lowered, corruption symptoms receded, shadow vein fluctuation stabilized. Lin Che sent a personal message shortly after. My shadows stopped thrashing around. A few seconds passed, then an addendum, but it feels like it's staring at me now. Su Jin mulled over the line for a long time. A shadow that watches its host. Fitting for a modern urban supernatural setting. Still, it sent a faint chill down his spine just imagining it beside him. Send a photo. Lin Che uploaded an image. The frame captured his bedroom floor, lit by a desk lamp, his shadow pooled in the corner. The shadow's edges were far darker than a normal person's, like half-dried ink. Su Jin zoomed in. There was indeed a small raised silhouette within the shadow, resembling a figure with its head bowed. He attached the photo to Lin Che's file in the Spectral Pavilion Register. Dayblade examined the image and said only, he possesses remarkable talent. Remarkable to what degree? Rare among low-tier awakened. His affinity aligns perfectly with reconnaissance, stealth, and rift exploration. Su Jin jotted the keywords down on paper. Reconnaissance, stealth, rift exploration, club suit. He paused, then asked another question. If he were admitted to the Fifth Academy, what kind of treatment would he receive? If his abilities are fully scanned and documented, he would be placed under priority observation at minimum. And if the Blackthorn Syndicate abducts him, they would turn him into a shadow-type corruption vessel. Su Jin's pen froze mid-stroke on the page, a blot of ink spreading outward. Turn him into one. The phrase sounded light on paper, yet its meaning was horrific. He set down his pen and rose to wash his mug. He twisted the faucet open, and the sound of a toilet flushing from the floor above cut through the water flow, draining the pressure to a thin, pitiful trickle. Su Jin watched the weak stream drip into the sink. A shabby old apartment complex. A top-tier card casket. A fifth-tier subordinate at his command. And barely enough water pressure to fill a mug. The absurd contrast made him huff a quiet, bitter laugh. His phone rang, Lin Che's voice call. Su Jin answered. The line was quiet on the other end. Only the low hum of an air conditioner outdoor unit audible. Can I ask you something? Lin Che's voice dropped to a nervous murmur. Go ahead. If I pass the assessment, will I have to fight those traffickers? Su Jin flipped his mug upside down to rest on the dish rack. It's a possibility. Could I die? That's also a possibility. Lin Che fell silent. Su Jin saw no point in empty platitudes. Questions about life and death could never be fixed with meaningless words of encouragement. Empty reassurances grated on adults, let alone a teenager still reeling from an abduction attempt. After a dozen seconds, Lin Che spoke softly. I used to think awakening powers were amazing. Su Jin leaned against the kitchen doorframe. My parents thought so too. They said if I got into the Fifth Academy, our family wouldn't struggle so much anymore. My mom dug out all my elementary school certificates and kept saying I'd always been gifted. Truth is, I failed math constantly back then. That certificate was just for outstanding sanitation student. Su Jin let out a quiet, genuine laugh. Lin Che chuckled faintly on the other line, a short, shaky sound. But those two men last night said unregistered awakened are the most valuable. They said someone with my shadow affinity could be cut open and sold for parts. Cut open. Su Jin lifted his gaze to his reflection warped in the window glass, his face completely blank of emotion. They were trying to scare you, but not everything they said was a lie, he told him. Lin Che's breath hitched. What am I supposed to do then? Su Jin walked back to his desk and pulled out his chair, its legs scraping harshly against the floor. You have two choices, he said. First, Register officially with the Anomaly Suppression Bureau. They will protect you, but they will also control your every move. You'll have a shot at the 5th Academy, yet you must hide all trace of the reservist card and the purifying essence loan. If your secret leaks, Spectral Pavilion will reclaim the card immediately. Second, complete Spectral Pavilion's assessment. If you pass, you'll receive an official low-rank card, access to our resources, mission assignments, and consistent danger. You are not recruited by us. You choose to sit at our card table of your own free will. Lin Che whispered. If I pick the first option, will you be angry? No, really? Truly. Su Jin hesitated a beat before continuing. But you will still owe the debt for the purifying essence. Silence stretched for 2 seconds on the line. Your organization keeps tight track of every debt, huh? Su Jin glanced at the resource ledger open on his laptop. Organizations that ignore finances collapse. Lin Che laughed again, lighter this time. I want to take the assessment, he said. You're certain? Not really. Why agree then, if you haven't made up your mind? I'm afraid if I overthink it, I'll lose my nerve entirely. Su Jin copied that line into the remarks section of Lin Che's file in the register. Afraid overthinking will steal my courage. Raw, unfiltered honesty. Tomorrow evening, abandoned basketball court behind North Bay Old Street. What will the assessment entail? You'll find out when you arrive. Can I bring anyone with me? No outside companions allowed. Lin Che hesitated, voice trailing off. What about rice balls? I get low blood sugar when I'm nervous. Su Jin glanced at the half-empty pack of dried noodles on his desk corner. That's permitted. Thank you. The call ended. Su Jin set his phone down. A system notification surfaced on his mental interface. Candidate Lin Che has confirmed participation in assessment. Exceptional talents qualify for adjusted assessment standards. No full exemption permitted. Su Jin read the text and pressed a palm to his left wrist. The card pattern etched into his skin felt cool to the touch. Keep watch tomorrow night, he told Dayblade. Dayblade asked, what intensity level for the assessment? Su Jin considered it briefly. Do not let him suffer fatal harm, yet offer no unfair advantages either. The abandoned basketball court sat at the rear of North Bay Old Street. 3 gaps gaped in the chain-link fence, half the backboard split clean down the middle, and the white boundary lines painted on the asphalt had faded to faint smudges. A single street lamp stood beside the court, its aging bulb flickering on and off like a person gasping for breath. Su Jin arrived 20 minutes early. He sat on the highest bleacher tier, clutching a bottle of mineral water, twisting the cap open and closed repeatedly. Click, click. The sharp sound echoed clearly across the empty court. Dayblade stood concealed in shadow, invisible to any ordinary human eye, at the very least. Is this venue suitable for the assessment? Dayblade asked. It's perfect for rattling his nerves. Is intimidating him the goal? The goal is to filter out those unfit to join. Su Jin screwed the cap shut tight. He spoke casually, yet a heavy weight settled in his stomach. This was his first assessment ever. If he made the trial far too easy, Spectral Pavilion would look like a childish game. If he pushed Lin Che too hard, the teenager might break completely. Su Jin had no desire to act as a charity caregiver, nor to send a kid he barely knew down a path of certain death. Where laid the thin line between mercy and necessity? No mentor had ever taught him this balance. He'd always watched other leaders boast confidently that they knew their limits, sounding calm and assured. Now that the responsibility fell to him, Su Jin wanted to erase that phrase entirely from his vocabulary. Knowing your limits was a vague concept with no measuring stick to define it. Lin Che arrived at 7:58. He slung a backpack over one shoulder, clutching a rice ball in his hand exactly as he'd mentioned. As he stepped onto the court grounds, he scanned every corner warily, as if expecting attackers to leap out from behind the hoop frame. When he spotted Su Jin, a wave of relief washed over his face, only to harden back into tension instantly. I'm here. Su Jin nodded. Did you eat the rice ball already? Lin Che blinked in confusion. Huh. Low blood sugar. Oh, I ate one. I still have another left. Set it aside on the bleachers. Lin Che carefully placed the rice ball on the front row bleacher, moving with the solemn care of laying out exam supplies. Su Jin descended the bleachers to stand before him. The assessment has 3 core rules. Lin Che snapped straight into rigid military posture at once. No need to stand at attention. There's no formal scoring panel here. Lin Che's shoulders slumped again. Su Jin continued. First, you must never disclose any information regarding Spectral Pavilion to outsiders. Second, if danger arises, you may send a distress signal, but do not treat your card as a disposable shield to sacrifice itself for your survival. Third, I will assign you a single objective. What objective? Su Jin lifted a hand. A small gray sphere rolled out from the storage compartment of his card casket and skidded to the center of the court. This was a training-grade corruption residue from the System Resource Vault, classified low risk. Despite its low-risk label, it looked deeply menacing. A clump of dried black sludge, tiny bubbles swelling and popping across its surface at random intervals. Lin Che's face paled slightly. What is that? Scraps from the corrupted entity that chased you last night. Could you phrase that less graphically? No. Su Jin gestured toward the far end of the court. Your task is simple. Retrieve the red marking embedded within the corruption residue and bring it back to me. You cannot touch the sludge with bare skin, and you must not let it catch up to you. Lin Che stared at the writhing black mass. It will chase me. Su Jin turned toward Dayblade. Dayblade raised a palm, a wisp of cold spade light drifting down to sink into the sludge sphere. The black sludge stirred to life. Lin Che jumped backward a full step. Whoa! His reaction was raw and unscripted. Su Jin nearly stumbled back alongside him, though he managed to hold his ground. Begin. Lin Che was completely unprepared. The corruption residue oozed across the asphalt toward him. It moved slowly, yet its viscous texture resembled sentient Play-Doh. Lin Che spun and sprinted away. After 2 steps, his shadow stretched out across the ground and suddenly lurched sideways, yanking his balance off kilter. His body failed to follow the shadow's pull. Thud! He crashed onto the pavement. Su Jin winced watching the fall. It must have stung terribly. Lin Che scrambled back to his feet. His elbow scraped raw, muttering a quiet curse under his breath. The sludge was still 3 meters away. Instead of running straight forward again, he circled along the 3-point line. His shadow stretched flat against the asphalt. At first, it twisted chaotically, like a ball of yarn torn apart by a cat. Gradually, the shadow coiled around a loose brick fragment on the ground, dragging the chunk forward to hurl it at the black sludge mass. The brick missed its mark. Lin Che gasped for air, chest heaving. Will it explode? Su Jin said. Guess. Come on, bro. Su Jin didn't reply. He watched Lin Che's shadow steady at last. Fear was plain to see. His body trembled nonstop. Yet he never called a halt. A second broken brick struck the edge of the black muck. The corrupted mass shrank back, revealing a faint glimmer of crimson within. Lin Che's eyes lit up. He charged forward, his shadow stretching thin from under his feet like a fragile hand, hooking the red glow and yanking it outward. The corrupted blob jolted upward in an instant. Lin Che was slammed to the ground, his candidate card flickering to life. Su Jin's hand had already risen. But Lin Che did not call for aid. Gritting his teeth, he wrapped his shadow around his own wrist and pulled hard backward. The red marker tore free. Plop! It clattered onto the concrete. Deprived of its target, the corrupted mass collapsed into a shallow puddle of black sludge. Lin Che lay sprawled on the ground, unable to rise for a long while. Su Jin walked over and stared down at him. You still breathing? Lin Che lifted a hand, clutching the crimson marker tight between his grimy fingers. Is the rice ball still edible? Su Jin glanced at his dust-caked palms. Wash your hands first. System notifications materialized mid-air. Round 1 assessment passed. Candidate Lin Che has obtained official assessment qualification. Su Jin held off on offering congratulations for the moment. He tossed a bottle of water over. Drink. Lin Che caught it, his hands still shaking as he twisted open the cap. Su Jin's gaze drifted to his shadow. The dark mass huddled quietly at his feet, far calmer than before, as if it had just been disciplined. As Lin Che drank, slow clapping echoed from beyond the basketball court fence. Clap, clap, slow and muted, yet the sound carried crystal clear through the abandoned court. Lin Che nearly spat out his water. Su Jin turned his head. Standing outside the torn wire mesh gap was a man in a gray jacket, around 30 years old, wearing a baseball cap, and clutching a heavy black plastic bag that sagged at the bottom, as if filled with damp matter. Su Jin had never seen him before, but the black vein snaking across the back of the man's hand was familiar. A member of the Blackthorn Syndicate. The man smiled faintly. Relax, I was just passing by. Su Jin scanned his surroundings. A back alley off the old street, derelict basketball court, 8:30 at night. Passing by. The excuse was as believable as claiming you'd only popped out to buy soy sauce. Lin Che scrambled to his feet, his shadow shrinking tight to his ankles. Su Jin raised a hand, signaling him not to move. The man stepped through the mesh tear, his shoes squelching across puddled rainwater. Impressive kid. Shadow affinity, unregistered, and capable of suppressing corruption on your own. Does your instructor know about you? Lin Che's face paled. Su Jin spoke up. What do you want? The man shifted his gaze to him. You're the survivor from Oldport, aren't you? You've got the wrong person. No need for false modesty. Your name's on our list. He set the black plastic bag down on the ground. The bag gaped open, rolling out a shard of corrupted matter. It was far larger than the chunk Su Jin had used for the assessment earlier. Lin Che muttered quietly. This stuff. Su Jin did not look back. His eyes locked onto the man's hand. The black vein bulged and writhed beneath the skin, as if something crawled beneath the surface. The Spectre Tower, that's your group, right? The man said. Black Spade traces last night. A club candidate card tonight. TSK, when did Lin Hai get an organization like yours? I've never heard a word of it. Su Jin listened without interruption. The more the man rambled, the more clues he spilled. The man took a step forward. Here's the deal. Hand over the boy and the card. I'll head back and deliver my report, and you can keep hiding in the shadows. No trouble for either side. Su Jin asked, Your name? The man blinked, then let out a laugh. Why? Planning to hold a grudge? Forget it if you won't say. Su Jin sidestepped to one side. The man's eyes followed his movement. He thought Su Jin meant to run. Lin Che thought the same. Only Blade knew otherwise. The six of spades glowed faintly beneath Su Jin's left wrist. Su Jin said, Show him what you've got. The man's smile still lingered on his face. The next second, a full, intact spade symbol split the concrete beneath his feet. It was no shallow blade cut, but a complete, solid spade mark. Cold black light surged upward from the ground, pinning the man to the spot. The black vein on his hand twisted frantically, unable to break free from his skin. The air plummeted in temperature. Lin Che clutched his water bottle, his mouth hanging half open in shock. Beside Su Jin, Blade's figure materialized slowly. No grand commotion, no gusts of wind. Only black robes, a long sheathed blade, and half-lidded eyes. The man's pupils shrank to pinpricks. Fifth tier. Blade paid him no mind. He turned to Su Jin. Eliminate him. Su Jin's eyelid twitched. The question rolled off his tongue far too casually, like asking if he wanted noodles for dinner. All color drained from the man's face. Su Jin held off answering immediately. He glanced at the corrupted shard at the man's feet, then at Lin Che. If a Blackthorn operative dared to come alone, there were likely lookouts nearby. Killing him would only stir up worse chaos later. Neutralize the corrupted matter, spare his life. Blade nodded. His blade remained in its sheath. He only lifted a single hand. An invisible blade intent bore down on the black vein across the man's hand, freezing it solid beneath his skin. The corrupted shard shattered into fine powder, and any oozing black sludge was evaporated entirely by the cold spade light before it could spread. The man dropped to his knees, his lips turning purple. Pass a message back to your people. Su Jin stepped in front of him. He rarely enjoyed looking down on others, especially when he wore beat-up slippers while the man knelt before him. A commanding aura came half from power, half from refusing to stare at one's scuffed footwear. He shifted his feet backward a little. Cards issued by the Spectre Tower do not fall under Blackthorn jurisdiction. The man's Adam's apple bobbed. Who exactly are you? Su Jin stared at him, offering no reply. Blade advanced half a step forward. The man clamped his mouth shut instantly. The effect was stark, almost unnerving. Su Jin turned to Lin Che. Let's go. Lin Che slung his backpack on in a rush, forgetting all about his rice ball. They reached the court entrance before he darted back to grab the rice ball and tuck it into his bag. Su Jin watched him. You still plan to eat that? Lin Che mumbled softly. It never hit the ground. Fair enough. The kid knew how to make do with what he had. Once they stepped outside the court, a new system alert flickered into view. Public intimidation via 6 of spades completed. Blackthorn Syndicate will reassess the threat level of Spectre Tower. Su Jin stuffed his left hand into his jacket pocket. Trouble was coming. But reputations were forged exactly like this. The next morning, announcements for the joint assessment hosted by Lin Hai's 5 major academies flooded every online platform. Su Jin woke to his phone swamped with notifications, local news alerts, app push notifications, forum trending posts, and over 300 unread messages in his residential complex group chat. He tapped open the group chat. The top message was a voice note sent by Boss Lu from the breakfast shop downstairs. Let me tell you, this joint assessment with the 5 academies is huge. Words going around Lin Hai is about to produce an S rank awakened. Officials have even come into town. Dozens of replies followed, everyone clamoring to confirm the rumor. Some sent red envelopes. Others asked if awakening powers could cure herniated lumbar discs. Su Jin skimmed a few lines then exited the chat. The world was endlessly complicated. Scrolling through trending posts about superhuman abilities, he saw parents asking about registration requirements, merchants hawking awakening nutrient meal kits, and commenters praying their children would awaken lucrative, marketable abilities. As he kept scrolling, an image caught his eye. The joint mandate of the 5 academies. Black background with white text, stamped with the seal of the Linhai branch of the Anomaly Suppression Bureau alongside emblems from the 5 academies. The official text read, "Source energy fluctuations have spiked sharply across Linhai City. To safeguard awakened individuals, the 5 academies will advance the joint assessment and release additional reassessment slots." Reassessment slots. Su Jin tapped to zoom in. A block of fine print at the bottom noted that survivors of the Old Port incident could apply for special observation screening. He fixed his gaze on that line. Survivors of the Old Port incident. He qualified. Lin Che qualified too. The Blackthorn Syndicate compiling survivor lists, and the 5 academies suddenly opening extra reassessment slots lined up too perfectly, like 2 threads intersecting on a tabletop. His card case vibrated softly. A message popped up from Lin Che. "My school sent out notices too. Teachers told me to sign up for reassessment." Su Jin typed a reply. "Go." Lin Che replied instantly. "Won't my candidate card get detected?" "Keep it concealed. How do I hide it?" Su Jin stared at the question, silently wondering the same thing himself. He opened his card table. Lin Che's club candidate card floated above the surface, its faint patterns unstable. With such low authority, high-grade detection equipment would easily pick up its traces. "Can we mask its presence?" Su Jin asked Blade. "Overlay a king card over it." "What's the cost?" "Consume life credits." Su Jin glanced at his resource bar. His stock of life credits was dwindling. The system had never fully explained the currency, only stating they could be earned through faction missions, corruption purges, and member contributions. All his current reserves came from the new user starter pack and post-Old Port incident settlement rewards. Every expenditure depleted his limited supply. Su Jin massaged his temples. Leave the card unmasked, and Lin Che risked being flagged as anomalous. Mask it, and burn through precious life credits. Upcoming assessments, investigations into Blackthorn, and dealings with the Anomaly Suppression Bureau all demanded ample resources. Adulthood offered no clean choices, only mounting costs to settle. Mask it. The king card blazed to life. A thin layer of monochrome light draped over the club candidate card. A sharp prickle stabbed Su Jin's left wrist, like a tiny pinprick. Candidate card concealment complete. Duration, 3 days. Su Jin relayed the outcome to Lin Che. Lin Che waited half a minute before replying. "Thank you." Another thank you. The boy was unfailingly polite. Su Jin headed to the kitchen to boil eggs. The water had just come to a boil when his phone buzzed again. This message was from Lu Hong. "Su Jin, have you seen the joint assessment notice?" "Just came across it. Survivors of the Old Port incident qualify for reassessment, and your name's on the observation watch list." Su Jin nudged the eggs around the pot with chopsticks, their shells clinking against the metal rim. "Do I have to attend?" "It's strongly recommended," Lu Hong said. Many survivors develop secondary awakenings after source energy burns, while others suffer delayed corruption reactions. The screening's for your own safety. Safety benefits. Su Jin stared at the churning, boiling water. "Where is it held?" "Newport Training Ground, Bay 23. Bay 23. 5 days from that day, matching the countdown timer on his system. Lu Hong added, "There was a significant source energy fluctuation around North Bay Old Street last night. Were you in the vicinity?" Su Jin's chopsticks froze midair. "I was home. A witness spotted someone matching an Old Port survivor's description in that alley. Probably just a lookalike." Silence stretched across the line for a beat. Lu Hong chose not to press the lie. "Stay vigilant. Linhai's growing unstable lately." "Thanks, Captain Lu." The call cut off. One eggshell cracked wide open in the pot, egg white oozing out to drift across the surface in thin white streaks. Su Jin turned down the stove flame. The joint assessment. The Anomaly Suppression Bureau. The 5 academies. The Blackthorn Syndicate. Every faction's gaze fixed firmly on Newport Training Ground. He suddenly pictured the Blackthorn man's terrified face when the spade symbol pinned him to the ground the night before. The Spectre Tower had revealed a fraction of its power. Now every party would come poking around, ready to flip over his cards. Su Jin headed to the city library afterward. Not to study. His home desktop lagged horribly. Opening more than a dozen browser tabs sent its cooling fan roaring, as if preparing for takeoff. The municipal library offered free public computers and air conditioning. Its only downside was the young boy beside him doing homework, who couldn't stop twirling his pen nonstop. Click, click, click. Su Jin endured 5 full minutes before switching desks. He pulled up materials on the 5 major academies. Kyushu Academy carried the strongest official backing, a primary talent pipeline for the Anomaly Suppression Bureau. Shanghai Academy specialized in consortium backing and source equipment technology. Shiyao Academy focused on ancient bloodlines and rule-based ability research. Baida Academy excelled at sealing artifacts and deciphering prehistoric relics. Tianheng Academy prioritized Rift frontline combat training. Their public introductions were polished and generic, filled with hollow, bureaucratic phrasing, nurturing fertile ground for young awakened growth, building a premier training hub for next-generation source energy talent. Su Jin's eyelids grew heavy reading the corporate-style jargon, indistinguishable from notices posted by the Residential Property Management Office. He switched to forum threads, where users spoke far more plainly. Kyushu for stability, Xinghai for wealth, Xuyao for arrogance, Baida for eccentricity, Tianheng for reckless combat. A comment below added that ordinary awakened applicants were judged not only by tier ranking, but personal background. Reserved recommendation spots for elite clans and major consortiums were an open secret no one bothered hiding. Su Jin copied the paragraph into a document. Background connections, controlled resource access, exclusive opportunity channels. These were the real hidden cards that governed reality. A talented awakened without family or institutional backing waited idly for others to pick them first. It was no surprise an unregistered Shadow Affinity user like Lin Che had drawn Blackthorn's attention. Su Jin continued digging into local Linhai power structures. Several long-standing clans sponsored the 5 Academy assessments year-round. The Zhou clan ran source equipment transportation lines. The Gu clan dominated medical care and stabilizing agent production. The Shin clan got its start trading fringe black market resources before cleaning up its public image in recent years. Su Jin paused on the Shun clan entry. Shun, the Diamond 2 candidate named Shin Yin mentioned in his plot outline. He had yet to cross paths with the boy. A archived news article popped up in the search results. A young collateral branch member of the Shun clan was implicated in a North Bay black market smuggling ring. The case's final resolution remained undisclosed. He clicked the link, only to hit a 404-page missing error. Su Jin leaned back in his library chair, cold air from the air conditioner nipping the nape of his neck. That was the core problem. Public records were sifted clean, sanitized, and unremarkable. All meaningful, incriminating information remained buried in unseen cracks. His card case vibrated once more. The Diamond candidate card flickered faintly. Black market resource anomaly logged. Key tags: Shunyan, North Bay black market, resource trafficking channels. Su Jin rubbed the corners of his tired eyes. Pairing those 3 keywords together left little room for doubt. They tied straight to the Diamond faction. Noted. The pen-twirling boy glanced over at him from the next table. Su Jin clamped his mouth shut, remembering he was in a public space. His phone vibrated again. A new message from Lin Che. My teacher said there's a preliminary screening before the 5 Academy assessment. Should I hold back and act average? Su Jin replied. Perform normally. Do not voluntarily reveal your card. Lin Che typed back quickly. What counts as normal? I threw up halfway through the 800-meter school fitness test last year. Su Jin huffed a quiet laugh at the text. Show standard ability output. Physical fitness results don't matter. A simple got it followed, then another message. My mom asked if I've started dating, since I'm glued to my phone all day. Su Jin typed a reply, then deleted it twice before settling on. Tell her you're stressed about the reassessment screening. Lin Che responded. That'll only make her worry more. Su Jin flipped his phone face down on the table. Family ties constituted another major risk factor. The Spectre Tower did not recruit members publicly, and dragging candidates' ordinary civilian families into danger was out of the question. He added a new column to his faction roster file. Family risk profile. Lin Che's parents are non-awakened civilians. All exposure to them must be avoided. Mid-writing, Su Jin paused abruptly. What about himself? Did the version of Su Jin occupying this world have any living relatives? His ID address, utility bills, and old computer files all existed on record, yet no parents, childhood friends, or former classmates had reached out to him voluntarily. He'd scrolled through his contact list, only finding generic labels: landlord, part-time employer, delivery courier. It was as if his entire personal history had been deliberately erased. He pushed the unsettling thought aside. He had no bandwidth to investigate his own past right now. Focus first on unraveling everyone else's secrets. At 5 in the afternoon, the library's broadcast-announced staff would begin tidying reading areas ahead of closing. Su Jin saved all his research materials and stood up, his legs numb from sitting for hours. When he stepped forward, pins and needles prickled across every sole. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself while waiting for circulation to return. The pen-twirling boy walked past and whispered, "Mister, your legs fell asleep?" Su Jin stared at him. "Mister? Great." The world had just dealt him another small blow to his self-image. He stepped out of the library to find heavy dark clouds hanging low across the horizon. A new notification popped up on his phone, not from Lin Che. An encrypted link sent from an unfamiliar anonymous account. The subject line held only 4 characters: North Bay Manifest. Clicking random unknown links was basic common sense. Su Jin stood on the library sidewalk, staring at the message labeled North Bay Manifest, his finger hovering over the screen without pressing open. Click it, and he risked malware or tracking software. Ignore it, and he might miss critical clues. After a moment's thought, he walked to a nearby cell phone shop and spent 20 yuan buying the cheapest used feature phone available. The shop owner eyed him curiously. This model only makes calls and sends texts, young man. Can it load web pages? Technically yes, but it's agonizingly slow. Slow is fine. The owner handed over the device. Su Jin took it, its plastic buttons rigid as abacus beads beneath his fingertips. He found a bubble tea shop and sat down, connecting the feature phone to public Wi-Fi before slowly tapping open the encrypted link. The page loaded for 30 full seconds, so sluggishly he nearly gnawed through his plastic straw. It finally finished loading. It was not a web page, but a single image. A transaction manifest for the North Bay black market, scheduled for that night. The list cataloged corrupted matter fragments, low-grade source crystals, and counterfeit Awaken registration certificates. One entry was circled in bold red ink. Half a vial of purified source essence. Su Jin's finger froze on the screen. Half a vial. The exact amount Lin Che had used the night of the assessment. How had this item appeared on a black market trading list? Blade's voice echoed in his mind. A lure. Bait for me. Possibly. Su Jin studied the transaction location printed at the bottom of the image. Basement level 2, North Bay, entrance to the abandoned cold storage facility. Time, 9 o'clock that night. 3 hours remained until the trade. He chewed a tapioca pearl from his drink, its flavor bland and cloyingly sweet. The bubble tea was far too sugary. His mind, however, turned ice-cold with calculation. The Blackthorn Syndicate knew half a vial of purified source essence had entered circulation. They might not yet know he was the one who supplied it, but they recognized someone capable of accessing such rare resources. For the fledgling Spectre Tower, rare resources were bait to draw in talented young awakened. For Blackthorn, those same resources served as bait to hunt him down. The lure smelled irresistible, but the hook hidden beneath was razor-sharp. Su Jin snapped a photo of the manifest and saved it to his faction roster archive. He then sent a message to Lin Che. Do not leave your house tonight under any circumstances. Lin Che replied instantly. What's going on? Someone's laid a trap using purified source essence as bait. Silence stretched on the other end of the chat window for a long moment. Eventually Lin Che sent, Is this my fault? Su Jin stared at the line of text. Deny it outright, and the lie would be obvious. Admit it, and the boy would toss and turn in panic all night. He typed a measured response. It's about the rare resource supply, not just you alone. It offered little comfort, yet held complete truth. Lin Che sent a single understood. Su Jin powered down the cheap feature phone and pulled out its battery entirely. As he finished the motion, he paused for a split second. He'd only seen characters in spy thrillers take such extreme countermeasures before. Now he fumbled through the steps himself, clumsy from lack of practice. He returned home and changed into a dark long-sleeve jacket. Standing before the mirror, he retightened the bandages wrapped around his left wrist. Midway through wrapping, the loose end slipped to the floor. He bent to retrieve it, slamming his lower back hard against the edge of the bathroom sink counter. A sharp hiss escaped his lips. Minor scrapes and aches accumulated nonstop lately. It was endlessly irritating. He unfolded his card table to examine his stored resources. 2.5 vials of purified source essence remained. For stabilizing source crystals, 11 low-tier candidate cards. These items were tempting, yet deadly dangerous. Joran, you follow me tonight. Strike them down right away? No, why not? I need to find out who's laying this trap. Joran voiced no objections. Su Jin pulled out a blank diamond candidate card. It had no assigned holder yet. Diamonds represented intelligence, resources, and logistics. If he could track down Xinyan tonight, or find a useful contact within the black market, this card would find its owner. At 8:30 in the evening, Su Jin arrived at North Bay. The entrance to the abandoned cold storage sat at the end of a downhill ramp. Faded cold chain advertisements lined both sides of the slope. Water pooled along the base of the walls, making the ground slippery underfoot. He did not head straight down. First, he stopped at a convenience store and bought a pack of tissues. The clerk asked if he wanted a membership. Su Jin shook his head. Stepping outside the shop, He tore open the packet and pulled out a sheet to wipe his palms. They were slick with nervous sweat. Once done, he tossed the crumpled tissue into a trash bin. Down the ramp, someone lit a cigarette. A tiny flame flickered to life. Su-Jin caught fragments of their conversation drifting over. Purified source essence. The old port. The cards. He lowered his gaze and melted into the shadows. A system notification surfaced in his vision. Black market trading ground nearby. Warning. Resource bait may trigger open hostilities. Su-Jin brushed his pocket where the blank diamond card rested. Let's see who takes the bait first. The second underground level of the cold storage was far hotter than Su-Jin had anticipated. This was supposed to be a refrigerated facility, after all. As he descended the ramp, sweat soaked through the back of his shirt in minutes. The air reeked of mildew, cigarette smoke, cheap perfume, and waterlogged cardboard. Two men stood guard at the entryway. One collected entry fees, the other pat everyone down. Su-Jin set his phone, keys, and wallet into a plastic basket. The frisker's hand paused when it brushed the bandages wrapped around his left wrist. Injury. I fell. Unwrap it so I can check. Su-Jin glanced downward. No black marking lined the frisker's hand. He was merely a regular guard. But the man collecting money had already turned his full attention toward them. Joran's quiet voice echoed inside his mind. Shall I move to neutralize them? Su-Jin lifted his left arm. He'd only half unwound the bandages when a man behind them snapped impatiently. Why drag this inspection out? None of us are here to cause trouble. The guard spun around to shout a retort. Seizing the split-second distraction, Su-Jin re-wrapped the bandages tight again. Anything else you need to see? The guard clicked his tongue in annoyance. Move on inside. The underground market was chaotic. The abandoned cold storage had been split into countless tiny stalls partitioned by plastic tarps strung overhead. Bare light bulbs hung yellowed and stained with smoke. Vendors sold source crystals, forged identity papers, and unidentifiable metal machinery parts. In one corner stall sat a row of glass jars holding chunks of black, preserved flesh suspended in liquid. Su-Jin only glanced once before nausea twisted his stomach. Don't look. Focus on locating the trade stall. The stall selling half vials of purified source essence sat at the very back of the market, ringed by 7 or 8 onlookers. The vendor wore a full-face mask, with a transparent safety case resting beside them. Inside the case, that half vial of silvery fluid glinted harshly under the lights. Su-Jin kept his distance. He lingered beside a stall selling broken old source tool components and picked up a thin metal shard to feign interest. The vendor was a gaunt young man in his early 20s with unkempt hair and tape wrapped around the arm of his glasses. He hunched over a disassembled meter, a lollipop clamped between his teeth. Feel free to look, but don't squeeze the parts. Break it, you pay for it. Su-Jin set the metal shard back down. What's the asking price for the purified source essence? The young man didn't lift his head. You've got the wrong stall for that. You know the details anyway. I also know it's going to rain tonight. You gonna wire the Meteorological Bureau cash for that tip too? Su-Jin shot him a glance. This kid had a sharp, unruly tongue. The blank diamond card tucked in his pocket warmed faintly. A system alert popped up unbidden. Potential diamond candidate detected. Shunyan. Affinities, resource identification, source tool, disassembly, black market intelligence. Su-Jin tapped the edge of the stall counter with his fingertip. Shunyan. The half-assembled meter slipped from Shunyan's grasp and clattered apart on the table. He finally raised his head, clear eyes staring through his lens. Who sent you? Su-Jin ignored the question, his gaze drifting to the crumpled sheet of paper tucked under the corner of the stall. A thin black marking belonging to the Blackthorn Society peeked out from the folded edge. Shunyan followed his line of sight, his expression darkening instantly as he rushed to cover the paper. Don't stare at that. You're on their hit list as well. Shunyan bit down hard on his lollipop stick with a sharp crunch. Who exactly are you? A sudden argument erupted from the purified source essence stall. People shouted out bids. Others accused the vendor of selling counterfeit goods. The masked vendor opened the safety case and lifted out the half vial of silvery fluid. The moment the liquid left the container, the resource repository inside Su-Jin's pocket gave a soft tremor. A system notification flashed across his vision. Counterfeit purified source essence detected. Components: contaminant stabilizer, low-grade source crystal fluid, inductive mental marker. It was fake, and laced with tracking markers. Su-Jin turned toward Shunyan, who was also staring intently at the vial, his brow furrowed tight. It's a fake, Shunyan muttered under his breath. You can tell at a glance? Obviously. Genuine purified source essence absorbs light rather than reflecting it. This stuff looks like silver powder stirred into dish soap. Su Jin filed that observation away in his mind. He could appraise rare resources accurately. Promising. The masked vendor suddenly held the vial high for the whole market to see. If anyone doubts its authenticity, prove you hold a Pavilion of Souls card tonight, and this essence is yours free of charge. The market fell silent for half a heartbeat. Then a deafening buzz of chatter erupted. Su Jin caught voices mentioning the Pavilion of Souls, spade cards, and the brutal altercation at the old port. Shen Yan's gaze slowly drifted back to rest fully on Su Jin. You asked for my name earlier. Su Jin stared calmly at the stall surface. I was just asking for directions. You really expect me to believe that? Believe it or not, it's up to you. Su Jin stepped one pace forward. The blank diamond card slid out of his pocket and landed light in his palm. Shen Yan caught sight of the card, and his breath hitched short in his throat. Su Jin did not offer it to him. First phase assessment. Shen Yan lowered his voice. What's that entail? Track down the source of this counterfeit essence. Shen Yan glanced between the masked vendor and Su Jin. Why should I help you? Su Jin flipped the diamond card to its reverse side. The card glowed faintly, projecting the deep, light-absorbing silver radiance of genuine purified source essence onto its surface. Shen Yan's eyes sharpened with interest. Su Jin closed the card again. Because you know what the real product looks like, and you also know the Blackthorn Society has marked you for elimination. Shen Yan ran his tongue along the corner of his mouth. The sweet taste of lollipops still lingered, yet his expression turned bitter all at once. What if I turn your offer down? Then you can keep running your stall as usual. Over at the vendor's stall, people had begun patting each other down, searching for the coveted pavilion card. Su Jin set the blank diamond card flat along the stall's edge. Accept this, and we'll make it out of this underground market alive tonight. Shen Yan stared down at the card. The flickering overhead bulb sputtered twice inside the cold storage basement. He reached out and pressed a fingertip to the card's corner. Deal. Shen Yan's fingers remained steady as he touched the diamond candidate card. Nothing like Lin Che. The first time Lin Che held a card, his hands shook so violently he nearly crumpled it in his grip. Shen Yan was different. He stared at the card not with blind reverence, but as though examining an intricate source tool he itched to take apart, eager to dissect its mechanics, yet wary of triggering some destructive failsafe. Su Jin tugged the card back slightly out of his reach. Think it over fully before you commit. Shen Yan lifted his gaze. What happens once I take it? You gain access to long-distance communication, one emergency distress signal, and entry to the assessment trials. What's the cost I pay in return? The Pavilion of Souls will log your identity permanently. Shen Yan huffed a dry laugh. Sounds like turning an illegal drifter into a registered resident. Essentially the same thing. Noise swelled louder inside the cold storage basement. The masked vendor held the counterfeit vial beneath the bulb once more. Its silver sheen floated only on the liquid surface, dazzling the crowd. Several onlookers had already pulled open their money pouches, some doubtful, some gambling on its authenticity, others merely drawn to the spectacle. Shen Yan whispered, that mental marker embedded in the fake will activate the second the trade concludes. Whoever buys it will be tracked, and Blackthorn operatives will intercept them outside the market. They aren't just here for profit tonight. They're compiling a list of targets. Su Jin asked, can you trace the signal from the marker back to its origin? Shen Yan's eyes drifted to the diamond card resting in his grasp. Using this card? Is it feasible? A glint of sharp excitement flickered across Shen Yan's face as he licked his lip again. I can attempt it. Su Jin set a stable source crystal down on the stall counter. Shen Yan's breath caught softly at the sight of it. Genuine crystal? An advance payment against your future debts to the pavilion. Does everyone in the pavilion hand out resources this freely? All advances get logged to your tab. Shen Yan tucked the crystal away into a metal biscuit tin beneath the stall. I could get used to working for this pavilion. Su Jin refocused his attention on the masked vendor's stall. Bidding shouts grew louder by the second. Inside the card's private communication channel, Joran sent a message. Shall we move to engage? Su Jin shook his head mentally. Wait a little longer. He needed to see if the mastermind behind this scheme would expose themselves voluntarily. The counterfeit purified source essence was purchased by a heavy-set man wearing a gold wristwatch and 2 gemstone rings on his fingers. His face slick with oil as he grinned widely. 2 bodyguards stood at his side. He didn't blink once when handing over the payment. Shen Yan murmured, he's not the actual buyer. Su Jin shot him a questioning look. A plant hired to stir up bidding. The real purchaser will take delivery outside the market. The heavy-set man clutched the safety case and headed for the exit, half the onlookers trailing behind him to watch the spectacle unfold. Even in the black market, crowds flocked to commotion. Su Jin and Shen Yan followed at a safe distance. The lights along the passage leading out of the second basement dimmed progressively. One exhaust fan had broken down entirely, filling the air with a stifling, oppressive heat that tightened around their chests. Shunyin moved almost silently. For someone who looked like a reclusive technical tinkerer, his gait was far more balanced and steady than Su Jin's. An old injury throbbed in Su Jin's ankle with every quick step, forcing him to shorten his stride. "Your leg bothering you?" Shunyin asked. "A monster chased me through the old port yesterday." "Figures, that explains it. You're remarkably quick to accept all this. You see stranger things every day in the black market. Don't be shocked if you walk in tomorrow and find someone peddling fragments of their own soul." Su Jin's thoughts drifted back to Lin Che. Soul fragments can be traded? Shunyin shot him an amused glance. "You're actually asking that seriously?" Up ahead, the heavy-set man turned into the cold storage's rear exit alley. A gray van was parked outside. A gaunt, hollow-cheeked man leaned against the vehicle, one gray discolored molar visible when he opened his mouth. He stepped forward to take the safety case, flipping it open to inspect the contents. The gray tooth caught the light and glinted faintly. Shunyin lowered his voice to a barely audible murmur. "Gray Tooth, minor regional leader of the Black Thorn Society. Rank 3, modified through pollution-infused experimentation." Rank 3. Su Jin's mind instantly flicked to the 6 of spades card on his wrist. Joran remained unseen, hidden from plain sight. "Can you handle a rank 3 opponent?" Su Jin asked through their mental link. Joran replied, "Easily. Without revealing your physical form. That can also be arranged." A wave of calm washed over Su Jin. Having a rank 5 city protector ally was deeply reassuring. After receiving the safety case, Greytooth did not leave immediately. He reached out and patted the heavy-set man's cheek, wiping the grin clean off the man's face as the hired plant suddenly remembered his disposable role. "Where's the card?" Greytooth demanded. The heavy-set man stammered. I didn't spot anyone carrying one." "You didn't." Greytooth snapped open the safety case and tossed the counterfeit vial onto the concrete ground. The glass shattered on impact. Silvery fluid spilled outward, and the black speck hidden within expanded instantly, morphing into a tiny, shifting eyeball-shaped marker. A surge of nausea rolled through Su Jin's insides. The miniature eye rotated once, locking its gaze directly on his hiding spot beside the metal storage racks. Shunyin cursed quietly, the marker scanning for hostile energy signatures. Greytooth twisted his head around. His line of sight cut straight through the dim rear passage, landing squarely on Su Jin's concealed position. Su Jin did not hesitate. "Run!" Shunyin reacted even faster. The two spun and sprinted back into the cold storage corridors as Greytooth's cold laughter echoed behind them. Pavilion of Souls agents? Heavy footsteps thundered in pursuit, closing in fast. Su Jin's lungs burned after only a short sprint. He hadn't fully recovered from yesterday's brutal chase through the old port, compounded by staying up late to comb through intelligence files the night prior. His body felt like an unmaintained second-hand vehicle, every movement rattling with strain and pain. Shunyin glanced over his shoulder mid-run. "You've got a rank 5 ally bound to your card. Why aren't you summoning them? You're the intelligence specialist. Find us an escape route." "Damn it." Shunyin swerved left into a neglected maintenance room, kicking a half-shut door fully open. The space was stacked high with discarded refrigeration pipes. Su Jin darted inside after him, slamming his shoulder hard against an iron frame. The blow sent spots dancing across his vision. Shunyin heaved a thick metal pipe across the doorway as a makeshift barrier, then pulled 2 thin metal strips from his biscuit tin, clipping them to the doorframe. 3 seconds of blinding distraction once triggered. 3 seconds of what? Greytooth's boot slammed hard against the door a heartbeat later. The metal strips detonated in a burst of blinding white light. Su Jin squeezed his eyes shut, yet the glare still forced hot tears to stream down his cheeks. Shunyin grabbed his arm and hauled him toward a secondary rear exit leading to the facility's wastewater drainage channel. Flashbang shards, 3 full seconds of disorientation. The drainage channel was narrow and reeked of putrid sewage. The moment Su Jin stepped into the mucky water, one thought blared through his mind. These shoes are completely ruined beyond repair. Greytooth's voice carried down the passage behind them. "You little rats, how clever you think you are." A metal bar fence blocked the far end of the channel. Shunyin dropped to his knees and fumbled with the padlock, his fingers flying as he worked the mechanism. Su Jin glanced backward. Greytooth had stepped through the maintenance room's rear entryway, jagged black bone spurs erupting from his forearms. A rank 3 combatant, deadly among low-tier modified humans. A cold sensation prickled Su Jin's left wrist. Joran sent a message. "Shall I intervene now?" Su Jin watched Shen Yin still struggling to pick the lock. Wait for my signal. Greytooth stepped down into the wastewater channel, the murky liquid submerging his shoes without the slightest sign of discomfort. That pale gray molar glinted in the dim shadow as he spoke. Surrender your card, and I'll make your suffering brief. The padlock beneath Shen Yan's fingers gave a faint click. It did not unlatch fully. He muttered a frustrated curse. Rusted garbage lock. Su Jin raised his left arm. The frigid aura of the six of spades pressed against his skin. Greytooth caught that faint black glow and froze mid-step. So you really do possess one of their cards. Su Jin drew in a deep breath, the channel's fetid stench threatening to make him retch. Come take it, then. When Greytooth lunged forward, Su Jin did not summon Joran's physical form. Instead, he borrowed a single heartbeat of the rank 5's perception and power. A piercing cold seared up his wrist, as though a sword hilt had been driven straight into his bone, the frigid energy surging up his arm to settle heavy across his shoulders. The wastewater channel warped in Su Jin's vision. Countless thin luminous lines stretched across Greytooth's body, 3 burning brightest of all: his throat, right knee, and a spot just below his sternum. Joran's voice whispered directly beside his ear. Strike his right knee. Su Jin's body moved of its own accord, or rather, it felt as though his bones had temporarily been linked to a far more skilled fighter's muscle memory. He twisted sideways to dodge the jagged bone spurs extending from Greytooth's arm, splashing wastewater across his trousers as his feet slid through the muck. Disgusting as it was, his momentum never faltered. He snatched a broken metal pipe half submerged in the channel and swung it hard at Greytooth's right knee joint. That single borrowed heartbeat lasted barely an instant. Yet the blow landed with pinpoint, terrifying precision. The metal pipe connected with a sharp cracking sound against Greytooth's knee. Greytooth's lunge crumpled off balance. You. The luminous targeting lines vanished from Su Jin's sight. Agony crashed over him in their absence, and his knees buckled, nearly sending him crashing face first into the sewage. Shen Yin shouted from behind him. The lock's open. The metal bar fence swung outward. Su Jin stumbled backward, his footing slipping on the slimy channel floor, and half collided into Shen Yan's chest. The impact knocked a soft huff of breath from Shen Yin, who quickly grabbed the back of Su Jin's shirt to steady him. That borrowed power comes with brutal side effects, huh? Quiet. Su Jin forced the words out through gritted teeth. Though wounded in the knee, Greytooth did not collapse. He kicked the broken pipe aside, every trace of amusement wiped clean from his face. Borrowing strength from a high-tier ally. Your natural rank isn't even first tier. A heavy weight sank in Su Jin's chest. The enemy had seen through his trick instantly. Greytooth's shoulders bulged, more jagged black bone spurs tearing through his shirt fabric. Capture them alive, they'll fetch a high bounty. Shen Yin hauled Su Jin through the gap in the fence and out into the rear alley of the cold storage. Rain had begun to fall again. Stacks of plastic crates lined both sides of the narrow lane, each filled with pooled rainwater. Su Jin only managed a few running steps before nausea churned violently in his stomach. He braced a hand against a brick wall and gagged, though nothing came up. One heartbeat of borrowed power. This crippling pain was the cost of just that small window of strength. If he held on to Joran's power even a second longer, his body would likely tear itself apart on the spot. Greytooth slammed through the metal fence behind them, bending the thick iron bars clean apart with brute strength. Shen Yin threw a panicked glance backward. Why don't you call your rank 5 partner out to fight already? Su Jin wiped the bitter taste from the corner of his mouth. I will. Then why waste time testing your borrowed power earlier? I needed to gauge its full limits. Shen Yin stared at him in disbelief. You tested it with your life hanging in the balance. Su Jin privately thought he might be slightly insane for that reckless choice. But he had to learn exactly what he could accomplish by borrowing Joran's power. He could not rely solely on summoning Joran to fight every time danger struck. The card's power required multiple methods of utilization. That single heartbeat had let him spot Greytooth's critical weak points, proving he could briefly wield a rank 5's combat intuition for himself. The price was excruciating pain. His pain was so intense that even his fingertips went numb. Greytooth had chased them all the way to the alley entrance. Su Jin lifted his left wrist. The 6 of spades flipped over. Joran stepped out from the rain curtain. His long blade remained sheathed. Greytooth froze mid-step. The ferocity on his face washed away as if doused by cold water. 5th tier city guardian. Joran stared at him. Kneel. Greytooth refused to kneel. He spun around and fled. Shen Yin stared in shock. He's fast. Su Jin leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. Joran raised a hand. The scabbard jabbed forward lightly. A black crack split the pavement at the alley mouth. The crack snaked after Greytooth, coiling around his shadow. He was yanked violently to the ground, crashing face first into the puddled rainwater. A loud slap echoed. It sounded agonizing just to hear. Zhou Ren walked over and pressed the scabbard down against the nape of Greytooth's neck. Eliminate him. Su Jin closed his eyes. This was the second time the man had asked. He would need to add a new rule to his code of conduct later. Spare his life. Neutralize his polluted modifications and hand him over to the Anomaly Suppression Bureau. Shun Yin tilted his head to glance at him. You're surprisingly law-abiding. I just don't want extra trouble. What's the difference between the two? Su Jin lacked the energy to explain. Zhou Ren bore down harder with the scabbard. A dull groan rumbled in Greytooth's throat. The black bony spurs protruding from his back shattered one by one, rotting like waterlogged timber. Black toxic fluid streamed down with the rain, draining into the sewers. Shun Yin paled watching the sight unfold. This is the power of a fifth tier. A dull ache still throbbed in Su Jin's left wrist. He stared at the card-shaped shadow clinging to Zhou Ren's frame. Yeah. So what tiers exist within the guest soul pavilion exactly? Su Jin did not answer. System notifications floated into view. Card borrowing crisis resolved. Block candidate Shen Yin completed first joint operation. Warning. King card load rising. Su Jin stared at the warning and pressed his temples with a palm. Rainwater trickled through the gaps between his fingers. All he wanted right now was to head home and take a shower. The stench of the sewage would soak into his skin if he waited any longer to wash up. Su Jin could not go home to shower immediately. Zhou Ren dumped Greytooth in the back alley behind the cold storage building, leaving him crumpled like a sack of discarded damp trash. Shun Yin knelt beside the man, rummaging through his pockets. What are you doing? Gathering evidence. I thought you planned to loot the body. Shun Yin did not look up from his work. Evidence counts as belongings recovered from a suspect. Su Jin watched him pull out a black coin, an encrypted access card, and half a vial of pollution stabilizer. His practiced movements made it easy to suspect he had done work like this countless times before. Shun Yin wiped the water off the encrypted card and held it out to Su Jin. This holds entry access to Blackthorn Society's Linhai member roster. We'll need specialized equipment to decode it. Do you have the gear? Not on hand. Su Jin fixed his gaze on him. Shen Yin added quickly, but I can build it. Fair enough. This was classic block territory ingenuity. Sirens wailed in the distance. Zhou Ren issued a reminder. Anomaly Suppression Bureau forces are approaching. Su Jin stowed the encrypted card inside his card case storage space. It was his first time storing ordinary items there. The space felt far more casual than when he kept purified source crystals inside. As the card vanished into the card surface, he almost considered stuffing his soaked shoes in alongside it. He dismissed the thought. The card storage space was not a laundry hamper. He turned to Shen Yin. We're leaving. Where to? Away from the crime scene. What about Greytooth? Leave him for the Bureau agents. Shen Yin glanced between the unconscious man on the ground and Zhou Ren. Your organization's methods are odd. You hold lethal power, yet refuse to kill, and you pass up chances to seize valuable materials. Su Jin took a step forward, wincing as a stab of pain shot through his knee. You're free to back out if you dislike our ways. Shen Yin tucked a metal cookie tin inside his jacket. I never said I hated it. The pair circled out through the back alley and boarded an overnight city bus. Only 3 other passengers occupied the vehicle. The driver, a middle-aged woman dozing in a seat, and the 2 of them. Shen Yin sat by the window, rainwater still dripping from the cuffs of his trousers. He stared down at his block candidate card for a long stretch of time. Su Jin leaned back against the rear seats and shut his eyes. The bus jolted along the road, churning his unsettled stomach. The nauseous aftereffects of channeling Zhou Ren's power lingered. His consciousness slipped into the card table domain. This time, he was not alone with Zhou Ren. 2 blurred, empty seats materialized beside the long table. The figure of Lin Chen coalesced first in the club candidate seat. Before his form fully solidified, a quiet murmur escaped him. Did I drift off to sleep? Shen Yin lifted his head from the block candidate seat. His physical body remained seated on the moving bus, yet his awareness had been pulled into the card table realm. Instead of fear, his first reaction was to reach out and touch the tabletop edge. What material is this made of? Su Jin sat in the main master seat. Don't touch it randomly. Shen Yin pulled his hand back, speaking earnestly. Force of habit from my line of work. Lin Chen's eyes widened upon spotting Shen Yin. You're one of us too? Just join the group, Shen Yin replied. This counts as a group chat? It looks more like a high-end conference room. Su Jin rapped his knuckles against the tabletop. A dull thud echoed. The soft sound pulled both men's attention back to him. This marked their first official card assembly. The atmosphere resembled a homeroom teacher calling students in for a private talk more than anything else. He briefly recounted the Blackthorn Society roster, counterfeit purified source crystals, and Greytooth's encrypted access card. He omitted critical details, the power he had borrowed from the King card, and Zhou Ren's exact tiered authority. Lin Chun paled as he listened. Xin Yan, by contrast, grew more alert and focused the longer he heard. Hand me the encrypted card, and I can extract partial entries from the roster. What's the cost? I need decoding equipment, source crystals, and a quiet workspace. Su Jin studied him. Didn't you run a street stall? The Blackthorn Society knows its location. It's unsafe to use after tonight. His fingers pressed lightly against the table as he spoke, as if holding back some hidden frustration. Su Jin noticed the motion, but chose not to comment on it. I'll source the decoding equipment. You can draw in advance of source crystals, logged as a debt under your name. Shen Yin huffed a faint laugh. More debt tracking. No resources come free within the guest soul pavilion. Lin Chen spoke up timidly. What about the half vial of purified source crystal I took earlier? That also goes on your tab. Lin Chen fell silent at once. A simple roster floated above the card table surface. Su Jin 6 of spades, Zhou Ren club candidate, Lin Chen block candidate, Shen Yan. Rows upon rows of empty seats surrounded them. The vacant chairs stung to look at. Su Jin stared at the ring of unoccupied seating. As of tonight, you two remain only candidates. To earn an official suit card, you must pass the final trial assessment. Shen Yan asked, what happens if we fail? Your candidate card will be reclaimed, fragments of your related memories will be blurred per domain rules, and all resource debts you've accrued will remain outstanding. Lin Chen raised a hand, genuinely lifting it into the air. Is there any way to wipe the debts entirely? Su Jin looked straight at him. Lin Chen lowered his hand. Just curious. Zhou Ren had stood silent beside the card table this entire time. He spoke at last. Someone is drawing near to your physical bodies in the real world. Su Jin snapped his eyes open. The bus pulled to a stop. The vehicle doors slid open, and two figures clad in black raincoats stepped aboard. A black vein-like marking snaked across the back of one man's hand. Xin Yan's face drained of color back on the bus. Su Jin sent a mental message through the card link within the domain. Assembly suspended. The card table realm dissolved away. The bus doors closed, and the night vehicle rumbled onward down the rain-slick road. There was nowhere to hide on the cramped bus. Su Jin sat in the back row, Xin Yan by the window. The two black-coated strangers stood near the front doors, one gripping the handrail, while the other stared down at his mobile screen. The harsh white cabin lighting cast a frigid glow over everything. Rain streaked vertically down the exterior windows, stretching street lamps into long streaks of pale yellow light. Su Jin avoided direct eye contact with the two men. He watched their reflections warping across the window glass, their faces distorted as though trapped beneath rippling water. The man bearing the black hand marking lifted his gaze, sweeping his line of sight across every passenger in the cabin. Shen Yan clutched his metal cookie tin tightly to his chest. Su Jin messaged him through the card channel. Stay perfectly still. Shen Yan replied, I haven't moved an inch. His physical form remained motionless, yet his knees trembled, rattling the seat beneath him softly. Su Jin rested his left hand over his shaking knee, his sleeve covering the glowing card runes wrapped around his wrist. He could summon Zhou Ren to manifest, but unleashing a fifth-tier warrior inside a public bus would create far too much commotion. The driver and the sleeping woman were innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. Rules. The guest soul pavilion lived by its rules. He could not rely on Zhou Ren's blade to cut through every obstacle. Su Jin squeezed his eyes shut for a heartbeat. The card table flickered briefly back into view. Rows of empty seats sank into shadow all around him. Each chair waited silently for a new holder, and also waited for him to make a fatal misstep. The king card rested heavy atop the master seat, its runes glowing brighter than they had in prior summons. Current available authority: card link communication, short-range storage, candidate card concealment. Manifesting the 6 of spades will generate high-tier energy fluctuations. Risk advisory: low-intensity escape tactics will minimize exposure risk. Low intensity. A very polished, formal way to phrase holding back full power. Su Jin opened his eyes again. The next bus stop was fast approaching. Get off at the next stop, he messaged Shen Yan via the card link. They'll follow us. Let them. Shen Yan twisted to glance back at him, his expression heavy with unease. Su Jin shook his head faintly. The bus pulled into the station, and the door slid open. Su Jin rose slowly, moving at a natural, unhurried pace as any regular passenger would disembark. Shen Yan followed close behind, and sure enough, The two black-coated men moved to step off as well. A shuttered old shopping mall stood beside the bus stop. Only the underground parking garage entrance lit with a faint green neon sign. Su-Jin walked toward the garage ramp. Shun Yin lowered his voice. There's almost no one down there. That's exactly the point. I thought you wanted to avoid drawing attention a minute ago. No witnesses mean no attention to begin with. Shun Yin fell silent for a beat. That actually makes perfect sense. Shallow puddles dotted the parking garage floor, with only a handful of parked cars scattered throughout. Su-Jin halted in a blind spot out of reach of the security cameras. The two black-coated men stopped behind them. One of them smirked. Keep walking, won't you? Su-Jin turned to face them. Does the Blackthorn Society have nothing better to do tonight? The man's grin faded instantly. So it really is you two. Su-Jin made no attempt to deny it. Denial served no purpose any longer. Black veins crawled across the second man's hand, hardening into two thin barbs. Black toxic fluid dripped from the sharp tips, hissing and wisping white smoke where it hit the concrete ground. Shun Yin stepped half a pace backward, his hand drifting toward the cookie tin tucked in his jacket. Su-Jin lifted a hand to block him. Are you here hunting suit card wielders or hunting people? The black-coated man answered. Both targets hold value for us. You set your sights high. Greytooth failed because he was incompetent. The young man behind you, plus the Shadow Affinity student, are valuable merchandise. As for you, his gaze locked onto Su-Jin's left wrist. You might fetch an even higher price. Su-Jin nodded once after hearing the full explanation. He mentally drafted a new clause for the Guest Soul Pavilion rulebook. When hostile factions classify pavilion members as tradable goods, all negotiations are off the table. The Six of Spades flared to glowing life. Zhouren did not fully materialize into physical form. Only a translucent scabbard phantom sliced across the ground at Su-Jin's feet. A black fissure tore open across the parking garage concrete. Before the two black-coated men could lunge forward, their shadows were pinned fast to the ground by the crack's power. The fissure did not wound them, but slowed all their movements to sluggish slow motion. Su-Jin took a single step closer, a sharp twinge stabbing his left wrist. Channeling the Six of Spades power through the King card's conduit carried less strain than fully borrowing Zhouren's strength. Yet an icy numbness seeped into his bone regardless. Go back and relay a message to your superiors. He spoke in a steady, unwavering tone. Candidate suit cards of the Guest Soul Pavilion exist only to undergo trials, never to be locked inside trading cages. The black-coated man ground his teeth. Do you know who you're talking to? Su-Jin glanced down at the black fissure snaking across the concrete floor. The king card resting upon the master's seat in the card table trembled faintly. He did not utter the title of Pavilion Master. It was too soon to reveal that identity. I'm simply someone who remembers every slight against those under my protection. The translucent scabbard phantom pressed downward with force. The black vein markings covering both men's hands shattered simultaneously. They screamed in agony and collapsed to their knees on the concrete. Shun Yin gasped quietly from where he stood behind Su-Jin. Su-Jin did not glance back. Let's go. By the time they exited the parking garage, his left wrist throbbed so fiercely his fingers went numb. Shun Yin hurried to catch up beside him. This counts as low-intensity action. Su-Jin pressed his palm hard against his aching wrist bone. The garage ceiling didn't collapse. That meets the low-intensity standard. Shun Yin stared at him for 2 full seconds. The Guest Soul Pavilion lives by unyielding rules. Su-Jin climbed the concrete stairwell leading back to street level, the roar of rain crashing down around them once more. We have too many empty seats waiting to be filled. When there are too few of us, lenient rules leave the pavilion vulnerable to being overrun. Shun Yin said nothing further after that. Su-Jin gazed out over the rain-soaked streets stretching before him. He disliked lengthy philosophical speeches. That last comment had already crossed his self-imposed limit of verbose explanation. He resolved to keep his words shorter from now on. Shun Yin temporarily moved into Su-Jin's apartment. To be precise, he set up camp on the living room floor. He had brought a sleeping bag of his own making. Su-Jin stared at the gray fabric sleeping bag and asked, "Did you always plan to flee at a moment's notice?" Shun Yin stowed his metal cookie tin beneath the dining table. Surviving the black market taught me a sleeping bag and spare cash are equally essential supplies. How old are you? 21. You speak and act like you're 41. Thanks for the compliment. Su-Jin could not tell if the gratitude was genuine or sarcastic. Sharing a cramped one-bedroom apartment quickly laid bare their clashing daily living habits. Su-Jin drank water from ceramic mugs. Shun Yin filled his drinking water straight from the cooking pot. Su-Jin tied garbage bags tightly and left them neatly by the front door. Shen Yin would always rummage through discarded trash for reusable mechanical packaging and spare parts. It was 1 in the morning, yet Shen Yin still tinkered away at the encrypted access card. A small desk lamp cast a narrow pool of light over the table scattered with fine needles and tiny metal screws. Su Jin lay awake in the bedroom, listening to the constant click-clack of tools drifting from the living room. Sleep eluded him. The noise was not the issue. The king card resting within his wrist glowed with a persistent faint warmth that kept his mind alert. He climbed out of bed and walked into the living room, finding Shen Yin pressing his block candidate card flat against the surface of the encrypted access card. "What are you doing?" Shen Yin jumped in fright, nearly stabbing his own finger with the thin metal probe in his grip. "I'm testing the frequency synchronization between the suit card and the encrypted chip. Did I authorize you to run unauthorized tests with your candidate card? I thought independent exploration was encouraged for candidates." Su Jin fixed him with a sharp stare. Shen Yin set the block candidate card back down on the table at once. "All right, my mistake." He surrendered quickly without argument. Su Jin pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "What data have you decoded so far?" Shen Yin twisted the laptop screen around to face Su Jin. A long list of names filled the display. Some entries were code names, others real legal identities. Greatith's name sat atop a chain of smaller squads. Each target sorted into clear, categorized groups: shadow affinity wielders, source healing specialists, resource identification talents, and individuals with ties to the Old Port District. Lin Chen's name appeared under the shadow affinity category. Shen Yin's own name fell within resource identification. Su Jin's entry marked him as a contact connected to the Old Port. One single name glowed bright red on the screen: Shenran. Classified as source healing affinity with pollution calming aptitude, suspected alignment to the Heart Suit branch. Su Jin committed the name to memory. "Any other critical intel?" Shen Yin pointed to the bottom of the document. "The Blackthorn Society plans to strike on the day of the 5th Courtyard's public assessment. They don't only intend to capture gifted wielders, they aim to detonate residual Old Port pollution stored on site." Su Jin's chest tightened reading the word detonate. The 5th Courtyard assessment was a fully public event. Students, teaching staff, affiliated clan representatives, and Anomaly Suppression Bureau agents would all gather on the premises. The Blackthorn Society's willingness to unleash a pollution outbreak in such a crowded space spoke to extraordinary recklessness. Shen Yin slid his block candidate card across the table towards Su Jin. "I submit a formal promotion request to upgrade my suit card rank." Su Jin lifted his gaze to meet his eyes. "You only received your candidate card hours ago. The limited permissions of a candidate card are holding back my research. The card link communication cuts out mid-decoding, and the storage space cannot reliably transfer delicate decoding equipment. If you want me to fully analyze this roster, I need elevated authority." Shen Yin spoke rapidly, as though he had rehearsed the request countless times in advance. "I don't demand a high-ranking official suit card. Even a low-tier Block 2 or temporary block authority will suffice." Su Jin fell silent, staring down at the block candidate card resting on the table between them. Candidates held the right to send distress signals and participate in trial assessments, but they were not official recognized members of the pavilion. Granting an official suit card meant formally inducting Shen Yin into the guest soul pavilion. It was far too soon for such a promotion under normal circumstances. Yet the full Blackthorn Society roster laid out before him, paired with the looming timeline of the 5th Courtyard assessment, left them short on manpower. They lacked both people and adequate authority to counter the threat. Su Jin closed the laptop screen shut. "I will review your promotion application." Shen Yan's eyes lit up with hope. "But it comes with a trial assessment." "What does the trial entail?" Su Jin summoned the card table domain into partial view. An empty chair lit up within the block suit section of the table. No Block 2 card rested before the seat. Only a gray trial assessment card floated in its place. "Starting tonight, your assigned trial task is to break down the Blackthorn Society roster into actionable intelligence. 3 core objectives: locate Chen Ran's current whereabouts, map all suspected strike points for the assessment day, and uncover evidence linking the Blackthorn Society to Aurora Consortium." Shen Yin frowned. The timeline is far too tight to finish all 3. That is why it qualifies as a trial assessment. "What resources am I allocated for the work?" 1 stabilized source crystal, plus 3 temporary unlocks of the card storage space for equipment transport. Shen Yin stared back at him. "What happens if I fail the trial?" "Your candidate card will be reclaimed, and all outstanding resource debts will be doubled." Shen Yan's mouth twitched into a grimace. "You were born to run this pavilion." Su Jin leaned back against the wooden chair behind him. The hard frame dug uncomfortably into his spine after prolonged sitting. Save the praise and get to work. Shen Yan reinserted the encrypted access card into his homemade decoding reader. The laptop screen flooded with scrambled encoded data. His block candidate card hovered beside the monitor, its faint pale glow stabilizing slowly. System notifications surfaced above the card table. Block candidate Shen Yan has submitted suit card promotion request. Pavilion Master Trial Assessment registered. Vacant Block 2 card, slot awaiting Pavilion Master confirmation. Su Jin gazed at the empty block suit chair. The unoccupied seat did not speak a single word, yet he could feel it waiting for a new wielder to take their place. Shen Yan worked in complete silence once he focused on his decoding task. In that regard, he was far less distracting than Lin Shen. From 2 in the morning until 4, the only sounds filling the living room were rapid keyboard taps, the low hum of the source crystal powering the decoding rig, and the occasional crisp crunch as Shen Yan bit down on hard candy to stay awake. Su Jin could not sleep either. He sat beside the laptop, sorting through all public records tied to Chen Ran. Chen Ran, 19 years old, recent graduate of Linhai No. 3 High School. One documented failed Source Awakening attempt last year, newly added to this year's reassessment roster. Her father passed away years prior, and her mother works at a source pollution rehabilitation facility. Public files held minimal information, and her social media accounts were scrubbed clean of nearly all activity. Her last post, uploaded half a year prior, featured an orange tabby cat. The caption read, "It stole another pill wrapper off the counter again." Su Jin closed the photograph window. He could not justify granting someone an official suit card solely because they owned a plump cat. Shen Yan suddenly broke the quiet. "I found her location." Su Jin lifted his head. Chen Ran is listed on the 5th Courtyard preliminary screening roster, scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow at Xingang Training Ground Zone B. The Blackthorn Society flagged her as an extremely valuable hard affinity target. Her power calms pollution fluctuations? Precisely. She does not mend physical wounds like standard source healers. Her ability suits unstable emotional states and volatile source energy surges. Her power would be invaluable for containing a pollution detonation site. Su Jin rubbed his dry, strained eyes. In short, the Blackthorn Society doesn't only want to sell her off as a captive wielder. They likely intend to use her power to stabilize uncontrolled pollution outbreaks they trigger. Shen Yan rotated the laptop screen to reveal a full schematic of the Xingang Training Ground. Multiple red marker dots marked the drainage outlets, equipment storage shed, and medical tent zones. These are their planned strike locations. Suspected targets, Shen Yan clarified. They plan to mask old port residual pollution releases as mechanical equipment malfunctions, letting the contamination spread once the official assessment kicks off. Su Jin studied each red dot on the blueprint. If the intel held true, chaos would engulf the entire 5th Courtyard grounds on assessment day. The Anomaly Suppression Bureau would undoubtedly post guards, but the Blackthorn Society's bold plot implied they possessed methods to bypass standard security screenings. Do you have any direct proof connecting Aurora Consortium to their operations? Shen Yan pulled up a separate spreadsheet file. Columns of supply chain shipping logs filled the screen. Many supplier names had been redacted, but unique production batch serial numbers remained intact. The pollution stabilizer batches recovered from Greytooth traced back to laboratories owned by Aurora Consortium subsidiaries. We lack irrefutable smoking gun evidence, but this paper trail proves their stabilizer supplies are not generic black market goods. Su Jin nodded in acknowledgement. 2.5 of the 3 assigned trial objectives had been completed. He turned his gaze towards Shen Yan. Shen Yan's eyes were crisscrossed with bloodshot veins, his hair an even bigger mess. The lollipop stick in his mouth gnawed down to a tiny stub. How long have you gone without sleep? Depends on how you count it. Count it by a normal person's standard. 2 days. Su Jin fell silent. None of the members of this organization seemed in decent health. One suffered from low blood sugar, another hadn't slept in 2 days, and he himself had nearly thrown up from overexertion earlier. Perfect. The initial lineup of the Spectre Tower was all sub-health. A system prompt surfaced in his vision. Xingang Diamond Reserve Shen Yan's trial mission completion. Hi. Xingang Empty Diamond 2 card slot activated. Xingang Su Jin held off on granting the card for the time being. Get some sleep first. Shen Yan stared blankly. What? If I hand you the card now and you collapse on the spot, I'll have to explain myself to everyone. I'm not that fragile. Your eyes are bloodshot like you're about to mutate. Shen Yan brushed a finger against the corner of his eye. This is called intense focus. This is called sleep deprivation. Su Jin turned off half the living room lights, leaving only the desk lamp lit. Sleep for 2 hours. We'll head to the Newport training ground to find Chun Ran in the afternoon. You're coming too? I am. You're not a registered awakened. How will you get past the checkpoint? Su Jin pulled up a text message from the Abnormality Suppression Bureau's re-examination notice. Special observation for survivors of the Old Port incident. Chun Yin glanced over the message. This identity of yours is surprisingly useful. It's also extremely dangerous. Chun Yin dragged out a sleeping bag and lay down. He fell silent less than 2 minutes later. Su Jin sat at the table, poring over the training ground map, searching for holders of each suit. Spades already had Zhou Run. Clubs had Lin Che. Diamonds would soon have Xin Yan. And a target for hearts had appeared. Su Jin raised a hand to touch the card case in his pocket. The empty chair in the hearts section glowed faintly, as if someone was walking toward him from far away. Xin Yan slept for an hour and a half. When his alarm went off, he shot upright in the sleeping bag, his first words being, the data wasn't backed up. Su Jin held out a steamed bun to him. I made a backup. Xin Yan took the bun, stunned for a moment. You know how to back up data? I'm not some primitive caveman. You don't look like someone in a technical role. Su Jin glanced down at himself. Worn jacket, bandages wrapped around his wrist, dark circles heavy under his eyes. He really didn't fit the part. He looked more like someone fresh off the scene of a disaster without a chance to clean up. The two stepped out at 1 in the afternoon. Temporary barricades had been erected outside the Newport training ground. Vehicles lined both sides of the road, parents, students, and staff crowding the entrance. The scene was far livelier than Su Jin had anticipated. Vendors sold bottled water. People handed out flyers. Others held up signs advertising awakening potential consultation. Xin Yan pulled a baseball cap over his head and muttered under his breath. This place is like a temple fair. Su Jin swept his gaze across the entrance. You stay out here. I know. Black market dealers will also stake out this area. I'll track their contacts from the perimeter. Xin Yan handed him a tiny earbud. Su Jin stared at the earpiece. Is this secure? Safer than your cell phone. You're already complaining about the organization's equipment, and you just joined? Just stating facts. Su Jin slipped the earbud into his ear. It felt slightly bloated and uncomfortable inside his ear canal. He pulled out the re-examination text and passed through the entrance inspection. Staff scanned his ID card, then glanced at the bandages wrapped around his wrist. Old Port survivor. Yeah. Proceed to Zone B for registration. The training ground spanned a vast area. Running tracks, equipment zones, testing tents, a makeshift medical station. The air carried a mix of turf, disinfectant, and the faint warm odor of overheating electronic devices. Su Jin made his way to Zone B, where the registration queue was short. He spotted Chun Ran right away. She sat beside the medical tent, wearing a gray hoodie with her hair tied low, clutching an old canvas bag in her arms. A young boy beside her was wailing uncontrollably, seemingly still upset after a blood draw. Chun Ran pulled a candy out of her bag and offered it to the boy. The child's crying did not stop. Awkwardly, she rested a hand lightly on his shoulder. Su Jin watched a faint ring of red light ripple out through the air around her. The boy's sobs gradually died down. It wasn't her comforting words that calmed him. It was the chaotic surges of source energy around him being smoothed out. Hearts. Through the earbud, Xin Yan's voice dropped to a low murmur. I found black market contacts outside. Several people selling fake stabilization patches are asking around about hearts-type targets. Su Jin's gaze stayed fixed on Chun Ran. I found mine too. Don't hand over the card to her right away. I know. Su Jin walked over and took a seat on the bench beside her. Chun Ran glanced up at him briefly before lowering her head again, tucking the candy wrapper into her bag. Su Jin didn't strike up a conversation immediately. It would look far too deliberate. He picked up a registration form and filled it out slowly. Name, ID number, history of exposure to the Old Port incident. He paused when he reached the line labeled abnormal reactions. He couldn't very well write. Bound to the final fate card case, summoned a 5th-tier subordinate. Instead, he jotted down, wrist burns, occasional dizziness. A staff member walked over to Chun Ran. Chun Ran, you're here for the re-examination's calming tendency assessment. MHM, head to tent 3 shortly, don't wander off. We've got a huge crowd today. Chun Ran nodded. After the staff member left, she stared down, squeezing the straps of her canvas bag until her knuckles whitened. Su Jin handed in his completed form. As he walked back to his seat, Xin Yan's voice crackled through the earbud. The black market guys on the perimeter are moving. 2 of them are heading into Zone B. Su Jin grabbed a disposable paper cup from the nearby water dispenser and half-filled it with water. The thin paper crumpled easily under light pressure. He returned to the bench and sat down. Chun Ran's eyes flicked to the cup in his hand. Su Jin asked, nervous? She froze. seemingly caught off guard that a stranger would speak to her. A little. Me too. Chen Ran's gaze drifted to his bandaged wrist. You're one of the survivors from the old port? Survivor, yes. I see. Their conversation cut off short. The awkward silence hung thick between them. Su Jin took a sip of water. It tasted of cheap plastic. Inside the earbud, Shen Yin spoke again. They've entered the zone. Su Jin glanced toward the entrance. Two men wearing volunteer vests had blended into the crowd in Zone B, each carrying a file crate. A thin black thread snaked out from the bottom of one crate. Chun Ran bowed her head, apparently sensing something as well, pressing a hand to her chest. Su Jin set the paper cup down. The reserve hearts card tucked in his pocket turned cold against his palm. The two fake volunteers did not approach Chun Ran directly. They circled around to the rear of the medical tent and set their crates on the ground. One stood watch to block the view of passers-by, while the other knelt down, pretending to sort through documents. Through gaps in the crowd, Su Jin spotted the thin black thread from the crate sliding into a drainage drain. It was impossibly fine, barely thicker than a strand of hair. If Shen Yan hadn't warned him in advance, he would have never noticed it at all. Shen Yan's voice filtered through the earbud. The drainage system. That substance will travel through the pipes. What's their target? The medical tents and testing stations. They plan to unleash a small-scale contamination wave, then seize Hearts-type targets amid the chaos. Su Jin looked back at Chen Ran. She sat with her head bowed, hands clamped around her canvas bag, her breathing quickening. She could feel the unsettling aura, even if she couldn't identify its source. Su Jin stood to his feet. He'd only taken 2 steps when a staff member blocked his path. Please stay in your assigned waiting area. I need to use the restroom. That way. The staff member gestured toward a distant corridor. Su Jin nodded and circled around to the rear of the medical tent. The 2 fake volunteers were still there. One looked up and spotted him, forcing a polite smile. Young man, this area is off limits. Young man. Su Jin stared at him. At 22, strangers sometimes called him uncle, yet these black market dealers addressed him like a teenage student. The hierarchy of titles was utterly confusing. Where's the restroom? Left around the front bend. Su Jin glanced left in the direction he'd pointed. The thin black thread had already halfway slipped out from the crate the kneeling man tended to. A strip of silver-gray metal peeked out from the crate's crack, etched with a source device serial number. Shen Yan's voice rushed anxiously through the earbud. 4th-tier source device, modified mist core pump. Do not touch it. It will spew contaminant fog on contact. 4th tier. Far stronger than anything Lin Che or Shun Yin could handle right now. A cold tingle spread across Su Jin's left wrist. Zhou Ren could slice the device apart with a single strike. But there were far too many civilians here. The medical tent was packed with students undergoing re-examination, plus regular staff all around. If a 5th-tier power signature flared, the Abnormality Suppression Bureau would immediately zero in on him. Su Jin halted in place, acting as if he was genuinely searching for the washrooms. The fake volunteer's patience frayed. Left around the front bend, I told you. Got it. Su Jin walked forward. As he passed the drainage drain, the paper cup slipped from his grasp. Water spilled across the concrete ground. The empty cup rolled to rest beside the crate. Sorry about that. He bent to retrieve it. His left hand closed around the cup while the fingertips of his right hand pressed against the edge of the drain. He opened the internal storage space of his card case. A stabilization source crystal shattered into fine powder, which he pressed into the drain using the spilled water as cover. This was no attack. It was a block. Shen Yin had walked him through the basics last night. Stabilization source crystals could temporarily suppress low-tier contaminant flow. The ice would melt eventually, but it would buy critical time. The black thread writhing inside the drain froze solid. The kneeling fake volunteer's movements ground to a halt. He fixed his gaze on Su Jin. Su Jin picked up the crumpled cup and straightened. Thanks for the directions. I didn't help you with anything. The volunteer replied flatly, just being polite. Su Jin turned and walked away. A gust of wind whistled behind him. A thin black thread shot out from the crate, aiming straight for the nape of his neck. Su Jin ducked his head. The thread grazed through his hair and embedded itself in the tent pole beside him. The canvas swayed slightly, and someone inside the tent called out to ask what had happened. He couldn't afford to stir up a panic. Su Jin gritted his teeth. He dared not unleash the power of the 6 of spades, which left him only one option, the reserve hearts card. He lifted a hand and flicked the reserve hearts card toward Chun Ran's position. The card did not float through the air. It slid along the ground like a thin red paper shadow, stopping right beside Chun Ran's shoes. Chun Ran looked down. She'd seen it. Su Jin spoke to her via card surface communication. If you want to save everyone, Press your palm down on it. Chen Ran's face paled. Who's speaking? Don't ask questions. Just press it. Behind the medical tent, the modified mist core pump activated. Thin black fog seeped out through the crate's cracks, and the first people to catch the scent began coughing violently. Chen Ran stared at the reserve hearts card, her fingers slowly curling inward. She pressed her palm flat against its surface. A faint warm crimson light spread out from beneath her feet. The black fog did not vanish entirely, but its rate of expansion slowed drastically, as if a pot about to boil overhead had its fire snuffed out. One of the fake volunteers cursed under his breath. Confirmed heart's target. Su Jin caught every word. He lifted his eyes. Perfect. Their true intentions had been laid bare. Shen Yan's urgent voice came through the earbud. Su Jin, Abnormality Suppression Bureau agents are heading this way. Su Jin stared at the fog leaking from the crate. The King Trump card burned hot against his wrist. He had two choices: reveal a fraction of his power, or let the contamination spread unchecked. He drew a deep breath. Zhou Run. A frigid spade-shaped light descended to hover above the crate. Only an inch long. A single thin spade-shaped blade cut. The mist core pump clicked and fell silent. The instant the mist core pump shut down, a hush swept over Zone B. Not everyone caught sight of the spade-shaped blade mark. Ordinary civilians only assumed some equipment malfunction had released a strange fog behind the tent before it abruptly died down. But every registered awakened, field agent from the Abnormality Suppression Bureau, and several people wearing Academy insignia all turned their eyes toward that exact spot. Su Jin tucked his hands back into his jacket sleeves. A dull throbbing numbness spread across his left wrist. He couldn't rub it. Any obvious movement would draw unwanted attention. The fake volunteers attempted to flee. The Bureau agents moved faster. When Lu Heng led his team rushing into Zone B, Su Jin stood beside the water dispenser, still clutching the crumpled, empty paper cup. He looked utterly harmless. Lu Heng scanned the chaotic scene. His gaze lingered on Su Jin for half a second. That split-second stare was already enough to set Su Jin on edge. Su Jin lowered his head and tossed the cup into a waste bin. Chen Ran remained seated, her palm still pressed against the reserve hearts card. She could not fully perceive the card's form. The faint crimson light seeped out between her fingers, soothing the turbulent source energy fluctuations of several nearby agitated students. Her complexion was ashen pale. Su Jin sent a mental message through the card link. Lift your hand off it. Chen Ran flinched as if burned and pulled her palm away. The reserve hearts card dissolved into a wisp of faint light, vanishing into the cuff of her sleeve. She craned her neck to glance around the area. Su Jin avoided meeting her eyes. Now was not the time. Lu Heng had already reached the disabled mist core pump. A field agent leaned in to report quietly. Modified fourth-tier source device. Contamination spread suppressed. There's also a residual spade-shaped power mark. A spade residual mark. Su Jin sighed inwardly. He'd left another trace. Zhou Ren's power had been restrained to the absolute minimum, only releasing a single-inch-long blade mark. But fifth-tier power was inherently distinctive. Even a tiny flicker would be recognizable to anyone familiar with the higher tiers. Multiple pairs of eyes fixed on him from the spectator stands of the training ground. Su Jin did not turn to look back. He only caught glimpses of silhouettes reflected in the glass doors. An elderly white-haired scholar accompanied by youths in Xian Yao Academy uniforms. A man in a tailored suit wearing a brooch matching the insignia of Star Sea Academy. Several attendants from influential clans. Su Jin did not recognize any of them. But their stares held no mere curiosity. They were appraising something. Appraising the faint spade power mark. Appraising Chen Ran, who had single-handedly halted the contamination wave. And appraising the hidden members of the Spectre Tower scattered within the crowd. Shen Yan's soft voice echoed in his earbud. People outside are taking photos too. Be careful. Star Sea Academy's researchers are extremely sensitive to modified source devices. Withdraw from the perimeter immediately. I haven't collected full evidence yet. Leave now. Shen Yan fell silent for a brief moment. Understood. Su Jin walked back to his bench and picked up his registration form. The staff had descended into chaos. All re-examinations were suspended. Every old port survivor was ordered to remain in Zone B for secondary verification. He sat down. A student beside him whispered, "What happened just now?" Su Jin shook his head. "No idea. I saw a red light on the ground. Probably faulty equipment lights. Equipment lights don't sit on the floor." Su Jin shot him a glance. The student clamped his mouth shut. A few minutes later, staff escorted Chen Ran toward the medical tent. She slowed her pace as she passed Su Jin's bench. Beneath her sleeve, the hidden reserve hearts card glowed faintly once more. Xingang Chen Ran. Who are you? Xing'ang, her voice lacked Lin Che's frantic panic or Shun Yan's sharp edge. It was soft, as if she feared disturbing something fragile. Su Jin did not look at her. Xing'ang, if you want answers, keep hold of that card. Xing'ang, what exactly is it? Xing'ang, a choice. Xing'ang Chun ran, asked no further questions. She was led into the medical tent. Lu Heng walked over to where Su Jin sat. Su Jin rested the registration form across his knees, fingers pressing lightly against the paper's edge. Lu Heng spoke. I run into you again. Su Jin lifted his head. I'd rather not. Lu Heng studied his face, seemingly searching for hidden tells. Su Jin's only thought at that moment was hunger. Lu Heng said, Zone B operations are suspended. Come with me for secondary testing. Su Jin stood up. Can I get something to eat first? Lu Heng paused. After the test. Su Jin followed Lu Heng toward the testing tent. As he passed the glass doors, he saw the scholars and clan representatives still watching the area through the reflections. The secondary testing tent was far colder than the rest of the facility. The moment Su Jin stepped inside, tiny goosebumps prickled his arms. Lu Heng gestured for him to sit on a metal chair. The seat was rock hard, and as his hips touched the surface, an irrelevant thought crossed Su Jin's mind. The examiner clipped a silver energy monitoring wristband around Su Jin's left wrist. Su Jin instinctively flinched away. The examiner glanced up sharply. Stay still. It's freezing. Bear with it for a moment. Su Jin stared at the digital screen. A green energy waveform traced a flat, gentle line. Lu Heng stood beside him, clutching a stack of paper records. They still relied on physical paperwork in this day and age. After the old port incident, did you come into contact with any anomalous objects? Lu Heng questioned him. Su Jin blinked. Anomalous objects. Did the system count as one? What about the final fake card case? No, he replied flatly. The wristband vibrated faintly. The green waveform on the screen spiked upward sharply. The examiner frowned. An itchy sensation crept up the back of Su Jin's neck. The tense fabric carried a cloying blend of disinfectant and plastic fumes. Lu Heng flipped through his paperwork. What did you witness at the old port? Black fog, panicked crowds, police cordons, and a collapsed sausage stall. The examiner lifted his head to stare at him. Su Jin added, It's true. Sausages spilled all over the pavement. Lu Heng's pen halted mid-write. I'm asking about abnormal phenomena. The black fog counts as abnormal, doesn't it? Lu Heng fixed him with an unblinking stare. Su Jin met his gaze without a single extra facial movement. The wristband dug painfully against his left wrist, so he shifted his focus to his toes. A thin layer of damp residue from the old port still lingered on the soles of his shoes. A system prompt floated along the edge of his vision. Xing'ang final fake card case entering low visibility state. Xing'ang, an ordinary human energy signature. The prompt's wording felt like telling someone who couldn't swim to pretend to be a fish. Su Jin slowed his breathing rhythm. The green waveform on the screen settled back into its flat baseline. The examiner let out a quiet breath of relief. Source energy response falls below awakened threshold. Residual old port contamination traces may be present, but they remain unstable. Lu Heng did not speak immediately. A voice called for him from outside the tent. Captain Lu, Chun Ran's test results are in. She has a Hearts-type affinity, and her rating is still fluctuating wildly. Su Jin's eyelids twitched slightly. Lu Heng shot him a quick glance. Su Jin fixed his gaze on the tips of his shoes. The person outside lowered their voice, yet fragments still drifted through the tent walls. Chun Ran had been marked as a high-value target. It spelled trouble, but it was also worth the risk. Lu Heng closed his file folder. You cannot leave the training ground for the time being. The 5 Institute's assessment will continue. I'm not an examination candidate. You are a monitored subject. Su Jin stared at him. Lu Heng's expression remained completely unyielding. Fine. A monitored subject. The examiner unclipped the wristband from his arm. Su Jin pulled his hand back into his sleeve. He stepped out of the testing tent. Clouds smothered the sun, casting the grandstand's shadow straight to his feet on the training ground. Far off in Zone B, Chun Ran sat on an isolation chair flanked by 3 examiners. She clutched a canvas bag to her chest. Su Jin did not walk over. He spoke through the intercom channel. Don't hand over the badge. It took Chun Ran several seconds to reply. Xing'ang, they asked what the red glow is. Xing'ang, say you don't know. Xing'ang, will they believe me? Xing'ang, no. Silence hung on Chun Ran's end of the line. Su Jin watched her lift her head, sweeping her gaze across the crowd before quickly dropping it again. Xing'ang, then what good will claiming ignorance do? Xing'ang. Su Jin strode toward the vending machine nearby. By time, he inserted 2 coins. The machine jammed. No drink dropped. Su Jin tapped the metal casing. Still nothing. Xing'ang, how long do I stall for? Xing'ang, Chun Ran asked. A can clattered down with a dull thud. Su Jin bent to retrieve the icy bottle, twisted the cap open, and took a sip. The cold stung his teeth sharply. Stall until you have a choice to make. The Fifth Institute's assessment did not pause long over the broken mist core pump. The broadcast blared 3 times, its audio muffled as if half a sheet of paper had been stuffed inside the speakers. All re-evaluation personnel enter by designated zones. Old Harbor observers remain in the viewing area and must not approach the trial track. Su Jin was assigned to the 3rd row of stands. The plastic seats baked under sunlight, then chilled by wind, leaving him alternating between warmth and cold. He wedged the icy bottle between his knees, condensation dripping down his trousers. Annoying, but the cold kept his mind sharp. The trial track sat at the center of the training field. White lampposts framed a square zone ringed by a translucent energy barrier. Inside stood dilapidated building models, broken bridge props, moving target dummies, and several simulated pollution sources. Su Jin stared at those fake contamination zones. The black fog within was far too clean. Artificial. The mist from Old Harbor was nothing like this. It clung to shoe soles, coated throats, and seared lungs, triggering an unrelenting, unproductive urge to cough. Lin Che stood at the tail end of the Plum Blossom Division queue. Thin and willowy, he looked like an unopened bamboo stalk amid the crowd. His fingers picked repeatedly at the cuff of his school uniform, scratching, pausing, scratching again. Su Jin sent a message through the badge comms. Stop tearing your sleeve. Lin Che jolted. Xingang boss? Xingang, watch the front. I'm nervous. Pick at your trouser seams instead. That uniform's expensive. Lin Che glanced down and obediently shifted his hands to his thighs. Su Jin nearly choked on his cold drink. Blind obedience was almost unsettling. Xinyan's voice cut into the channel. Xingang, I am in the East Maintenance Corridor. Saw Starcy Academy staff inspecting the mist core pump wreckage. Xingang. Stay far away. Xingang am keeping a wide berth. Xingang. Su Jin glanced toward the east side. Blocked by crowds and the barrier, he could only spot several Starcy uniformed researchers huddled around a toolbox with a suited man standing beside them. He could not make out where Xinyan hid. The unseen danger was always the more troublesome kind. Don't steal any of their equipment. Do I look like someone who'd do that? You do. Xinyan sent no follow-up message, tacitly conceding the point. The trials commenced. The first participant was a pyro aptitude student. He conjured a ball of flame in his palm and slammed it onto a moving target. The fire bloomed beautifully, yet his aim veered off, charring the wall of a derelict building prop. A smattering of laughter rippled through the stands. Su Jin did not join in. He recalled the day he first arrived in this world, unable to even ignite a gas stove properly. After 2 fruitless presses, he'd briefly wondered if kitchen cooking required an awakened ability here. All humans adjusted to unfamiliar worlds in similar ways. The difference only lay in what each person adapted to. Some learned to operate kitchen appliances. Others learned to navigate lethal pollution zones. When Lin Che's turn arrived, several academy instructors seated trackside lifted their heads. Umbra Vein Affinity. Old Harbor Exposure Case. Suspected Secondary Awakening. Fragments of these remarks leaked out through the loudspeakers. Lin Che stepped onto the trial track and glanced back toward the stands. The stands were packed. He would never spot Su Jin among the mass of people. Su Jin set the icy bottle down by his feet. Don't look for me. Focus on the shadow to the left of the pollution source. You can move through it. Lin Che's Adam's apple bobbed. He sprinted forward. His first step was steady, but his second nearly sent him stumbling. More laughter echoed from the viewing stands. Su Jin tapped a finger against his knee. Lin Che did not turn back. His shadow stretched thin across the ground, slipping beneath the ruined building model. A heartbeat later, he rolled out from the shadows on the opposite side, colliding his shoulder hard against the prop wall. Pain crumpled his features for a split second. Yet he had reached the rear of the simulated pollution core. He pressed a palm flat against the core module. Black numerical values flickered rapidly across the display screen. A line of text popped up. Xingang Spatial Shadow Adaptation Rating. A Xingang. The stands fell silent for a beat. Lin Che sank to the ground, equally stunned by the result. Su Jin took another sip of cold water. Hey, solid score. It would boost his standing. No, upgrade his candidate badge. He twisted the cap tight shut. A faint commotion stirred near Chun Ran's position far off. Within the heart badge testing zone, several students with unstable source energy fluctuations were being calmed by staff. Chun Ran stood at their center, one hand clamped tight around the strap of her canvas bag, appearing oblivious to the stir she had sparked. A lecturer from White Pagoda Academy stood up in the front row of stands. Su Jin lowered his gaze. The 5 major institutes were now taking their group seriously, and the trials had barely begun. A faint scraping sound echoed up through the drainage pipes beneath the training ground. So quiet it might have been a fingernail dragging against sheet metal. Su Jin set the water bottle aside. Xinyan, check the drainage system. Xing'ang already investigating. Xing'ang Xunyan's tone was taut with tension. Xing'ang, the contamination hasn't faded at all. Xing'ang. That single scrape from the drain did not repeat. Trials continued across the field. The broadcast called out the next participant's name to sparse applause. Spectators chattered among themselves, some discussing Lin Che's rating, others fixated on the heart badge testing area. Su Jin sat unmoving on the stands, pressing his fingertips against the bottle cap. The sharp plastic rim dug into his skin. Minor pain kept his thoughts from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Xinyan's voice returned over comms. Xing'ang, 3 segments of active contamination residue inside the drainage lines. It's not from the mist core pump. This is live pollutant brought over from Old Harbor. Xing'ang, can you block it off? Xing'ang, I can seal 1 segment. Not all 3. Xing'ang. Has the Contamination Suppression Bureau noticed? Xing'ang, their attention's fixed on the trial surface. They haven't finished inspecting the underground network yet. Xing'ang. Su Jin's gaze drifted to Lu Heng. Lu Heng stood outside the trial track, listening to a field agent's report. His brows were drawn low, the clipboard in his grip bent slightly from his tight hold. They had noticed the contamination, but not fast enough. Lin Che finished his trial and was escorted to the rest zone. A young instructor from Obsidian Radiance Academy approached him, speaking in low tones. The distance muffled every word, yet Su Jin watched Lin Che's shoulders grow tenser by the second. Lin Che sent a quiet message over comms. Xing'ang boss, they asked if I'd consider signing an early training contract with Obsidian Radiance. Xing'ang, what did you say? Xing'ang, I told them I needed time to think it over. Xing'ang, that's fine. Xing'ang, they said the academy offers stable resources, dedicated mentors, campus housing, and a monthly stipend. Xing'ang. Su Jin glanced down at the 3-yuan icy bottle by his feet. A steady monthly allowance held undeniable appeal. He pinched the bridge of his nose. If you want to join them, go ahead. There was a long pause on Lin Che's end. Xing'ang, what about the Stray Spirit Hall? Xing'ang, the hall doesn't recruit student trainees. Xing'ang, huh? Xing'ang, we're not an academy. No dormitories, no school uniforms, no mandatory exams to sit for. Lin Che seemed thoroughly confused by this explanation. Su Jin watched the Obsidian Radiance instructor slide an electronic contract across the table toward Lin Che. He continued, you can enroll in an academy and still hold a candidate badge. The 2 paths aren't mutually exclusive. To join the Stray Spirit Hall, you have to choose it freely and pass its independent assessments. No one will hand you support or guidance. Xing'ang, they kept asking if I have someone backing me. Xing'ang, tell them no. Xing'ang, what if they don't believe me? Xing'ang, that's their problem, not yours. Lin Che tilted his head to scan the stands. Su Jin tugged the brim of his cap lower to obscure his face. At that moment, a middle-aged woman in a white Pagoda Academy uniform walked toward the Old Harbor Observation Zone entrance, staff trailing beside her. One staff member pointed directly at Su Jin. Su Jin's eyelid twitched. They had moved faster than expected. The woman climbed the stands and sat 1 empty seat away from him. She did not immediately question him about the broken mist core pump or the black blade mark on Chun Ran's badge. Instead, she pulled a pack of mint candies from her bag and held it out. Care for one? Su Jin glanced at the unopened candy pack. But candies offered by White Pagoda personnel could easily be laced with detection powder, for all he knew. My teeth ache. The woman smiled and stowed the candy back in her bag. Su Jin, Old Harbor survivor, 22 years old, unawakened upon re-evaluation. Your position here today is far too coincidental. Su Jin brushed a hand over his own cheek. Do I look like a suspect? You look like a bystander with too much insight. Watching a trial isn't a crime. The woman's gaze drifted down to the field. Chun Ran was surrounded by White Pagoda examiners, her heart badge energy readings still spiking erratically. Her fingers whitened around the bag strap as she clung to it. Her aura stabilization ability is extremely valuable. Do you know her? We crossed paths once today. Did you speak to her? Not a word. Over comms. Su Jin turned his head to meet her eyes. The woman stared straight back. Her irises were pale, cold as lab glass slides. Su Jin offered a faint smile. Instructor, I don't even have the login credentials for your academy's internal network. The woman did not return his smile. Sweat prickled Su Jin's palms. Standard surveillance equipment could not pick up badge channel communications. Yet White Pagoda specialized in ancient relics and seal technology. They could not be judged by ordinary standards. He slipped a hand into his coat pocket. fingers brushing a stable source crystal. Hard. Cool. A small anchor to steady his nerves. Down on the field, the drainage pipe scraped again. This time, the white pagoda woman heard it too. Her expression darkened, and she stood to hurry down the stands. Su Jin watched her depart and exhaled slowly. He had refused the candy and narrowly avoided being trapped in a line of questioning. Lin Che's cautious message pinged over comms. Xingang boss, I didn't sign the contract. Xingang understood. Xingang, I want to take the Stray Spirit Hall entrance exam first. Xingang. Su Jin's gaze locked onto the dark fluid slowly seeping out from the edge of the trial field. Then prepare accordingly. Xingang, prepare for what? Xingang, the exam might be moved forward ahead of schedule.